Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere you probably shouldn't. Deep into the back alleys of ancient Pompeii behind a narrow smoke-darkened doorway framed with crumbling stone and flickering lamplight. We're stepping into a Roman brothel known back then as a Lupanar, literally wolf den. You might be thinking this will be exotic, sexy, maybe even fun in a dark historical kind of way. Spoiler, it's not. You probably won't survive this night. Not physically, emotionally, or even spiritually. But that's half the thrill, isn't it? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not everyone's cup of hemlock, and I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city and the time in the comments. Let's see how far across the empire we've spread tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in front of a low 2-story stone building. It's not exactly hidden. Nothing shameful about sex in this society, but it is off the main road. Lanterns flicker inside, casting a reddish glow through a small slit window. Outside, a carved stone phallus points the way like a disturbingly literal signpost. It's not subtle, but then again, Rome never really did subtle. As you step closer, the stone beneath your sandals is smooth with wear. Countless footsteps, some eager, some drunk, many unwilling. The moment you duck through the low entrance, the air hits you like a punch. It's warm and moist, dense with the scent of oil, unwashed bodies, wine, old incense, and something metallic underneath it all, like rust or dried blood. It clings to your nose, creeps into your mouth. You taste it before you even see anything. There's no lobby, no velvet couch, no welcome. Just a narrow corridor, damp and echoing, lined with the tiny doors. Painted above each one are frescoes, chipped and smoke-darkened, showing vivid scenes you instantly wish you hadn't looked too closely at. One shows a woman straddling a man with her head thrown back, another a man standing while a woman kneels, arms bound behind her. Each room advertises its service. These aren't decorations, they're menu items. Your eyes adjust to the low light. Oil lamps are placed in niches along the wall, each flame barely holding back the dark. Shadows twitch and pulse, making everything feel unstable. Somewhere down the hall, someone is laughing, a low, slurred, too loud laugh, and then a sudden scream. It ends too quickly. You freeze. No one else reacts. A woman in her 20s steps past you, barefoot, wearing a sheer tunic that does absolutely nothing. Her eyes are smudged with coal, and there's a practiced blankness in her face. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't even look at the floor, just walks, eyes on the middle distance, as if her soul left long ago and forgot to take her body with it. You duck into an empty room, because there's nowhere else to go. It's called a cubiculum, but don't let the Latin fool you. It's barely bigger than a closet. The bed is a slab of stone raised from the floor, with what you assume used to be a cushion, now just fabric, ripped and stained with, best not to wonder. You sit. The stone is cold even in this heat and impossibly hard. It's not meant for comfort. It's meant for turnover. From the next room you hear murmurs. Pleasure, maybe, or pain. Sometimes in here it's the same thing. Above your head is another fresco. You can't help but look. The woman in the painting is grinning, legs wide, holding the man's head like she's about to snap his neck. Is it meant to arouse, intimidate, educate? Maybe all three? You remind yourself that this isn't a modern brothel. This is ancient Rome, where sex is transactional, political, performative, and very rarely mutual. You're not here for affection. You're not here for safety. You're here for spectacle. And speaking of spectacle, there's something deeply unsettling about how normalised this is. Outside, people are buying bread, sacrificing goats, gossiping in the forum. Inside, flesh is bought and sold like grapes at the market. Workers here are called meretrices if they're free, but most aren't. The majority are prostibuli, enslaved, branded, disposable. They sleep here, live here, die here, and if they're lucky, someone remembers their name when it's scratched on the wall in a graffito. That wall, by the way, it's covered in scribbles. Some are client reviews. "I screwed Marcia here," she moaned sweetly. Others are just crude jokes. One reads, "Lucius was here and spent a coin on nothing." Classic Lucius. There's even a drawing of a gladiator with a sword in one hand and, well, you get the idea. You notice a little offering niche carved into the wall. Inside it, a tiny terracotta statue of Priapus, god of fertility, forever cursed to carry a cartoonishly large erection, watches over the room. You wonder if that makes things better or worse. Probably worse. Here's the real kicker. This particular brothel, the one you're in now, was discovered almost perfectly preserved under volcanic ash. Yeah, this is the Lupanar of Pompeii, the most famous brothel of the ancient world. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, it buried this place under 20 feet of ash and pumice. Some of the people in here were frozen mid-act, entombed in plaster forever. They died in the same positions they were used in. Imagine being immortalised like that. There's an academic debate over whether brothels like this were state-run or just tolerated. Some argue they were part of Rome's carefully controlled sexual economy. Others claim they were shady operations running under the table, loosely protected by bribes and political indifference. No one's really sure, and maybe that's the most Roman thing of all. Deny, distract, and pretend everything's totally under control while your civilization burns. You glance at the doorway. No door. Privacy is optional. The walls are so thin you can hear every grunt and sob and whisper. A breeze flows in from the hallway, carrying the scent of sweat and smoke. You take a deep breath, but it doesn't help. You're still here. And this is just the beginning. The thing is, you're still trying to adjust when the smell goes from bad to something you didn't think existed. It hits you differently now, not just as a single stench, but as layers. Imagine wine gone sour in a broken amphora. Now mix that with old sweat, days old, like it's been baked into the walls, and to the sharp sting of body fluids that were never quite washed away. That scent, it has weight. It clings to your tongue like bad gossip and settles deep in your throat. You're not just breathing it in anymore, you're wearing it. Welcome to a Roman brothel. Somewhere behind you someone vomits. Not dramatically, just a wet sound followed by the scrape of something like a sandal. No one rushes in, no one asks if they're okay. Because here, this is normal. Part of the ambience. You shift on the stone bench and wonder how you got here. The sad truth, if you were a lower class Roman citizen or, worse, enslaved, you wouldn't have ended up here as a visitor. You'd be living here, working, breathing this air every hour of every day. And there's no Febreze in 79 CE. Every surface feels like it's growing something. The walls are damp, but not from weather. There's no plumbing here, no fresh water running through these halls. Waste runs under the streets outside, sure, but the back rooms are their own ecosystem. Mould creeps into the corners, barely visible in the flickering lamplight. You blink and realise there's something scuttling under the bed. A small insect or rodent. Maybe both. The workers aren't afraid of it. They probably name them. You step outside the cubiculum for a breath of air, which is a joke, really. The hallway is narrower than you remember. The walls lean in. A couple stumbles past, the man barely upright, slurring something in sloppy Latin. He slaps the worker beside him hard enough that her cheek turns red, and she just keeps walking. No reaction. Her eyes look past you again as if she's somewhere else entirely. She probably is. You duck into another room, one with slightly better light, and spot a broken pot in the corner. It's been used as a makeshift toilet. Don't ask how recently. No one's coming to clean it. Hygiene here isn't just neglected, it's non-existent. The ancient Romans loved their bathhouses, but the brothel isn't part of that fantasy. Here, water is a luxury and bathing is rare. Perfume covers what soap never touches. Oils and incense smother the air, but nothing disguises the core scent. Too many bodies in too small a space doing too many unspeakable things. Someone calls out from another room, Mercator, denari nunc. That means someone forgot to pay, and the brothel's enforcer is on his way. You lean into the shadows, hoping not to be noticed. It's not your drama, but that doesn't mean it won't touch you. This place doesn't recognise innocence. Everyone's involved, everyone's complicit. And speaking of that enforcer, he appears now. A thick man with a leather strap around his shoulder, face pitted from old acne or disease, eyes like dull coins. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. The offending client, a merchant from the look of his robes, tries to protest. But a quick punch to the stomach ends the debate. He groans and drops a coin onto the floor, not into a hand, onto the floor. The message is clear. He's not even worth the effort. You want to leave. You really do. But your curiosity has teeth, and they're sunk in deep. You step closer to the open courtyard in the centre of the brothel. A rare breath of air escaping into the night scare, a moonlight shaft falls across a mosaic in the floor, cracked, filthy, and still stunning. It shows a grinning Priapus weighing his enormous penis against a sack of coins on a balance scale. You can't make this up. The Roman obsession with sex wasn't just about pleasure. It was economics, power, control. Priapus was their punchline and their warning. This part of the brothel open to the stars smells only marginally better. A few girls sit on the stone benches, rubbing their feet, sipping cheap wine out of communal cups. One is missing several teeth. Another has an infection on her arm, red, swollen, leaking something that's definitely not supposed to leak. She catches you looking and offers a weak smile. It's not flirtation, it's survival. Maybe you'll be nicer. Maybe you'll ask for her. Maybe she'll get food tonight. A cat slinks by, tail up, eyes glowing. The girls don't flinch. The cat probably lives here, eats scraps, mice, maybe rats. You hope it eats a lot of rats. And here's where things get a little weird. Amid all this human tragedy, there's a strange attempt at normalcy. A girl braids another's hair. Someone hums a tune, something old, half lullaby, half dirge. You can't tell if it's comforting or terrifying. In the corner, a tiny altar holds a burnt offering. It smells like old herbs, maybe rosemary or myrrh. Someone's trying to keep the gods happy, or at least not angry, not tonight. There's a scholarly debate about whether these brothels were actually used full-time as sexual centres, or whether some were multifunctional, taverns by day, dens of vice by night. Some researchers argue that the brothel designation is a modern one, that Romans didn't separate sex from the rest of daily life the way we do. Others point to the explicit graffiti and architecture and say, come on, this was clearly a sex factory. It's probably both. Nothing in Rome fits into neat boxes, except maybe coffins. You start to notice the layers of noise now. The rhythmic squeak of wood beds, the occasional shout, laughter often forced, whimpers too quiet to be heard from outside. Somewhere, someone is singing a love song in Greek. Beautiful voice, wrong place, and back in the hall. You pass a fresco showing two men and a woman in a tangle of limbs. No one looks happy. The artist didn't bother with smiles. You're starting to think no one smiled here unless they were drunk, paid to, or both. You feel it in your chest now. Not just disgust or fear, but a creeping sadness. You came for shock, maybe for a little historical voyeurism. What you got was something far more raw. These were real people, living, suffering, pretending. And you're a ghost here, walking the edges of their reality, unable to help, unable to leave. Not yet. The smell hasn't left you. It's behind your eyes, in your clothes, under your skin. It'll be with you when you sleep, if you sleep. You're still standing there, frozen between two flickering oil lamps, when it hits you just how profitable all this misery really is. The Roman sex economy wasn't just a sleazy side hustle tucked into dark alleys. It was a system, organised, taxed, recorded. It pumped coin into the city like blood through veins, and the empire didn't just tolerate it, they depended on it. You look around and start seeing things differently now, not as a curious tourist in ancient decadence, but as someone caught in the gears of a well-oiled machine. And here's how the machine works. Everyone's got a role. The Lupanar itself isn't just a place, it's a business, run like a tavern, a warehouse, or a butcher shop. The girls, assets, the clients, income streams, the owner. He's probably somewhere nearby right now, counting his earnings, maybe hosting a private party in one of the bigger rooms upstairs. You won't be invited. There's a ledger involved. Literally. Roman brothel owners kept track of income. Names, dates, services rendered, coins received. Some brothels issued tokens, spintriae, small bronze or brass coins stamped with erotic scenes and a number. They weren't legal tender but served as a kind of brothel currency. Some scholars think they were used to bypass saying the act out loud. Others say it was just good business, like poker chips for a vice. Either way, they've found hundreds of these scattered across the ruins, lost between cracks in the stone. The girls, often enslaved, rarely got to keep the money. In fact, most never saw it. Everything they earned went to the leno, that's the brothel owner, or pimp if we're being honest. Sometimes the girls could buy their freedom, but the math rarely worked out in their favour. Freedom required savings, which meant clients, which meant more nights, more acts, more years. Most died before ever coming close. You move deeper into the building, trying to get a feel for the rhythm here. It's busy, shockingly so. You expected a kind of low buzz, but this place runs like a tavern at rush hour. And in a sense it is. Drinks are served, food too sometimes. You spot a small kitchen off to one side, where a bent old woman stirs something over a smoky flame. It smells like onions, boiled meat, and regret. A few girls pass by and snatch bites without stopping. This place is alive in a grotesque way. You pass a room where two clients are arguing over a woman, their voices thick with wine and entitlement. She stands against the wall, arms crossed, waiting for it to be over. Not concerned, just numb. There's a bouncer nearby, another ex-gladiator type. Maybe. Which is oddly comforting until you remember he's not there to protect her. He's there to keep the men happy, or paying, or quiet. Outside this building, sex work exists everywhere. In Thermopolia, that's the Roman fast food joints, in taverns, near the baths, even on street corners. But the brothel offers one thing those places don't: anonymity. The walls might be thin, but names don't always matter here. You're just another man among hundreds. No judgment, just coin. Except, of course, everything is judged. Not morally, Romans didn't tie virtue to virginity the way later Christian cultures would, but socially. A freeborn Roman woman, for instance, could be ruined by rumours. A senator's son caught in the wrong bed could tank his future career. Even in this permissive chaos, there were rules, appearances, that ever-important Roman idea of dignitas, public honour. And brothels like this, they were where men went to leave it at the door. Interestingly, brothel visits were so common that emperors occasionally weighed in on them. Augustus, ever the killjoy, passed moral laws to encourage marriage and discourage bachelor lifestyles. He wasn't trying to stop prostitution, just to keep the social order intact. You could sleep with whoever you wanted, so long as they were appropriate. Enslaved, lower class, foreign. The moment feelings entered the chat, though, that's when it got complicated. Which brings us to the weirdest part of this economic equation. Even in this deeply transactional environment, some men fell in love, or claimed to. You'll see graffiti scrawled across Pompeii's walls, "I love Fortunata," or "Myrtis stole my heart." Sweet, maybe, but also dangerous. Because if you're a client falling for a prostitute in ancient Rome, you're either about to ruin your life or hers. The economic structure here is simple but brutal. A girl might service 10-12 men in a day. Maybe more during festival season. Each client pays a few asses, Roman bronze coins, not much more than a loaf of bread costs. Multiply that by the number of visitors, subtract whatever cut the brothel owner gives to guards, cooks and lookouts, and you've got steady profit. No days off, no sick leave, no union. And what happens when a girl can't work anymore? Too old, too sick, too damaged. Well, that's the quiet part. She disappears. Maybe sold to another city, maybe left to beg in the streets. Maybe buried behind a bathhouse with no marker but a shallow grave and the smell of wine still lingering in her hair. You start to see their faces now. Not just bodies in flickering lamplight, but people. There's one girl who wears an old silver bracelet too big for her wrist. Maybe from her mother, maybe from a kind client. Another scratches tally marks into the wooden beam beside her bed. You count them. Hundreds, thousands. Is it a calendar? A record? A slow scream? It's easy to feel like you've fallen into some kind of hell, but this isn't hell. Not for them. For many, this is life. The only one they know. The only one they'll ever get. And that's what really gets under your skin. Not the sex, not the filth, not even the cruelty, but the mundanity of it all. This place doesn't shock them. It doesn't horrify them. It just is. You back away from the kitchen, your head swimming, and find yourself near the front again. There's a small alcove where the Leno keeps a money chest. It's heavy, locked, and engraved with swirling designs meant to keep curses away. Probably didn't work. Behind it, a wall painting shows Mercury, god of commerce, grinning as he counts coins. Above him, the phrase, lucrum sine pudri, profit without shame. You can't tell if it's meant to be ironic. You're not sure what you expected, honestly. Maybe a discreet negotiation behind a curtain. A few awkward nods and some eye contact. Nope. In this place, everything's on display, like a greasy fast food joint where shame's been deep-fried and served on a clay plate. The Roman brothel doesn't just offer sex, it sells it with the efficiency of a business that's been perfecting the pitch for centuries. You don't need to ask for anything here, just point at the wall. Yes, the wall, that fresco above your head, the one with the legs, the rope, the oddly acrobatic twist of bodies. It's not just art, it's a menu. These aren't romantic scenes or ancient erotica meant for ambience. These are literal depictions of what's on offer. Position A, position B, position C, which involves a stool and flexibility you haven't had since childhood. Think of it like ordering a combo meal, visual, quick, and deeply impersonal. A woman leans against the door frame nearby, arms folded under a half-torn tunic. She raises an eyebrow, not in flirtation, but in question. You get the sense that if you don't pick soon, she'll move on. Time is money here, and you're wasting both. There's a grim efficiency to it all. Clients stream in, get pointed to a cubiculum, pick their scene off the plaster, and leave a coin behind. There's no illusion of seduction, just transaction. You try to imagine how this works in real time. You enter the room, you nod at the painting, maybe mutter something in broken Latin. And then what? She plays her part, you play yours. The scene gets performed like a grim pantomime, over and over again, until it stops meaning anything. The coin you'd need to hand over would likely be a bronze as or two, maybe a silver denarius if you're going all out. It's cheap, disturbingly so. The value of a human experience reduced to less than the cost of a small loaf of bread. The absurd affordability isn't a kindness. It's a volume game. A girl here might see over 20 clients in a day, more during religious festivals when drunken revellers stumble in. Pockets jingling and morals gone. And it's not just what you pay, it's how. Romans weren't always keen on saying out loud what they wanted, especially the wealthier ones, those with reputations to protect. That's where the tokens come in. Little brass discs engraved with sex acts on one side and a number or Roman numeral on the other. You'd buy them outside, in taverns or from vendors on the street, then bring them here and hand one over like a coupon. One erotic experience, please. They kept everything clean. On paper, at least. There's still debate among historians about what those tokens really meant. Some argue they were government-issued as a kind of brothel receipt. Others think they were more private, a system invented by brothel owners themselves. Either way, the use of tokens hints at just how industrialised this system became. Sex wasn't taboo, it was logistical. You glance at the nearest fresco again. The paint is chipped and darkened with age. But the figures are clear. The man is reclining, the woman straddling him, both locked in a look that's more duty than desire. Above it, someone has scratched a Latin phrase into the plaster. Felix fui cum illa. I was lucky with her. It's unclear if he means performance, survival, or both. Some of the frescoes are surprisingly specific. One shows a woman bent forward with a man behind her. Another has a couple standing against physics, it seems, while a third shows two women and a man in a tangle of limbs. There's even one with what looks like a whip in the corner, hinting at kink long before safe words were invented. You stare a second longer, then blink and look away. You're not sure if you're scandalised or numb, probably both. The girls don't look at the paintings. They've seen them every day for years. They know exactly what each scene means, which poses require the least effort, which clients tip, which ones don't. You get the impression some of them have their preferences, not for pleasure, but for strategy. One pose might be faster, another might keep a client from getting too handsy, a third might hide bruises. That's the secret language here, not the Latin phrases scratched into the wall, not the groans you hear through thin stone, but the coded decisions of survival, made second by second. She picks this room, not that one, this client, not the other, this act, which leaves less evidence. It's all tactical, and while you're trying to process all this, someone laughs. A deep, drunken cackle that echoes through the corridor and rattles the wall beside you. A man emerges from a room, tunic loose, belt dragging behind him. He stumbles past without even noticing you. Behind him, the girl follows, face blank, holding a small coin between two fingers like it's tainted. She turns into another room without a word. You want to ask her something, anything, but you don't speak her language. And even if you did, what would you say? Are you okay? She'd laugh or ignore you, or tell you what she tells everyone. Of course, Dominus, I live for your pleasure, because that's the script, the only one they're allowed to follow. You pass another wall of graffiti, this one more explicit than before. Carvings of genitals, names, scores. One reads, Myrtis does it best for 2 asses. Another says, I visited the Lupanar and left a better man. That one is probably a lie. But it's the kind of thing Roman men told themselves as they staggered back to their wives, their villas, their lives of public virtue. You spot something different near the exit, a small board scratched with what might have been prices once. The plaster's faded, but the outline remains. 3 coins for this act, 1 coin for that. There's even an old joke in the margin, pay less, last less. Odds. Classic Roman wit. Even in brothels, someone had time to workshop punchlines. So this is how it works. You walk in, you scan the walls, you hand over your token, your coin, your soul, you follow the painting like a recipe. Then you leave. And for a moment, just a breath, you feel something. Maybe shame, maybe nothing. And that's the scariest part. You start to understand how someone could do this again and again, until the wall scenes aren't shocking, until the silence after the act becomes the only part that feels real. And that's when you realise it's not that you wouldn't survive the violence of a Roman brothel, it's that you wouldn't survive the numbness. You finally find a room that's empty, temporarily. It's just a few steps off the main corridor, a cramped cubiculum like the others, maybe 4 feet wide by 6 feet long. You duck your head beneath the blackened stone archway and step inside. The air is hotter here, like someone's just been in it. The walls sweat with moisture. The single oil lamp flickers weakly in its alcove, casting shadows that seem to crawl along the plaster. You sit down on the slab bed again, cold, hard, slightly angled for drainage, and immediately regret it. The chill goes straight through your skin to your bones. You look around, absorbing every grimy detail. The floor is beaten dirt, packed down by years of footsteps, some barefoot, others in worn sandals. There's a pile of discarded rags in one corner, maybe a client's forgotten tunic, maybe someone's attempt at a blanket. There's also something that smells like old wine and stale urine. You wish it were just wine. The so-called bed is stone, yes, but you can tell there was once an effort to make it more inviting. The broken remains of what was once a mattress lie torn and filthy beneath you, coarse wool filled with straw, now flattened, rotted and infested. You shift and feel something move underneath. Probably lice, possibly worse. One of the fringe facts about these places is that even fleas have their own graffiti. In one brothel graffito, someone scrawled, "Greetings from the bedbugs," above a crude sketch of a man scratching himself. You're not laughing. The walls of the cubiculum are still painted, though the images here are more faded, more resigned. A woman reclines, eyes closed, her arm draped across her brow. The man behind her looks bored. The eroticism is lost under centuries of soot, but also maybe it was never really there. It's function over fantasy. You're not here to fall in love, you're here to pick a role and perform it. You lie back. Not because you want to, but because you want to understand. Just for a moment, you put yourself in the position of the woman who works here. And it's horrifying. You're staring up at a cracked ceiling, one small oil lamp to your left. No privacy, no escape. A man you don't know, or worse, you do know, is between you and the only door. You're here because someone else owns your life, and you do this not once, but over and over again. All night, every night, until your body gives out or your mind finds a way to float away. You hear someone outside, soft footsteps, then a laugh, the rhythm of sandals on stone, then the sound of flesh on flesh, somewhere close. The walls don't block anything. Every room is a performance for its neighbours. Nothing is hidden. Everything leaks through, moans, sobs. The scrape of a belt against a wall, even the dull thud of a fist. You wonder if anyone ever knocks. You already know the answer. In the corner you spot a bowl. You didn't notice it at first. It's filled with cloudy water, or something pretending to be water, and a stained cloth. That's it. That's the cleaning protocol. Between clients, the worker uses this to wipe herself down. Sometimes the same bowl is shared between multiple women. You feel your stomach turn, and the really grim part? This is considered one of the better brothels. In some parts of Rome, it's just a tarp, a tree, and hope the guard looks the other way. There's another academic debate about how much autonomy, if any, these women had. Some argue that even enslaved sex workers had personal agency, that they could choose clients, negotiate, exert subtle power. Others say that's just a modern fantasy projected onto a system that was brutal by design. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Some girls survived by adapting, some by performing joy so convincingly that men believed it, some by disappearing inside their own heads. You notice a small inscription scratched into the wall near the lamp. Livia est optima. Livia is the best. You wonder who wrote it. A client, another girl, Livia herself. Maybe it was the only way to take control of her soiree, to remind the next person who entered that she was more than a function, that she was remembered. There's something deeply haunting about lying in this room knowing what's happened in it. The energy is still here. not in a supernatural way, but in the weight of what was endured. You think of the bodies that pressed into this stone, the hands that gripped the walls, the breaths that fogged the air. None of it was gentle, none of it was free, and all of it happened right here, on this slab where you now lie. You sit up, suddenly claustrophobic, your skin itches, your stomach knots. The air feels thicker than before, it sticks in your throat like phlegm. You want out of this room, you want sunlight, you want soap, but there's nowhere to run. You're still in it, trapped in this little stone coffin of someone else's nightmares. As you stand, your hand brushes against the wall and a chunk of plaster crumbles away. Beneath it, another layer of paint. Older, rougher. You squint. It's a different fresco, half covered, showing a woman holding a small mirror, her face serene. She's not engaged in any act, she's just there, looking at herself. It feels out of place, personal, almost defiant, like someone painted it before the room became what it is now, before someone decided this space was best used for selling bodies. You run your fingers over the cracked edges, gently brushing away dust, and for a moment you feel it again, that weight, not just of sex or violence, but of time, of lives piled on top of lives, forgotten, overwritten, lost beneath layers of plaster and politics. Someone once lived here, then someone worked here, then someone died here. Now you're standing in the same spot, breathing the same air. Outside, the footsteps return. A girl passes by, her hair braided tight, her gaze flat. She pauses just long enough to glance in, then keeps walking. Maybe she used this room once. Maybe she painted that face on the wall. You'll never know. But one thing is certain, if you'd really spent the night here, you wouldn't come out the same. If you came out at all, you might be starting to think the people working in this place were all Roman, right? Born and bred citizens of the empire, cashing in on a rough gig and counting the hours till they could buy a villa and retire. That would be wrong. So wrong, it's almost funny. If you're picturing olive-skinned Roman women lounging in togas and flirting between clients, you need to forget everything you've seen in movies. The truth is much darker and much farther from home. The women and some of the men who work here are not Romans, not by birth, not by blood. Most are enslaved, dragged from far-off provinces you've only ever heard of in history books. Greek girls with names like Dione and Thaleia, Syrians taken from dusty villages along the Euphrates, Thracians from wild, wooded lands, eyes like hunted animals, maybe a North African boy with a name no one here even tries to pronounce right. The Roman brothel is a mosaic, but not the kind you admire on the floor. It's built from stolen lives, reshaped and rebranded for profit. You step into another hallway, darker than the rest. The lamplight here struggles to reach the corners, and the temperature drops slightly. The rooms feel smaller, if that's possible. These aren't the featured workers, the ones who get their names scratched into walls like minor celebrities. These are the ones no one talks about, the fresh arrivals. The invisible ones, and you see it on their faces when they pass. Some are just girls, not young-looking women, girls, 13, 14, maybe younger, faces blank, shoulders hunched. One still has dirt under her nails, like she came here straight from the slave market, which she probably did. Her name might not even be hers. When a girl is purchased for work like this, she gets a name that fits the business. Something easy to shout down a hallway, something sexy or ironic. You pass one called Cara, which means joy. You doubt she's smiled in weeks. The language barrier is brutal. Many of them don't speak Latin, at least not at first. Some pick it up fast, just enough to understand the basics. Yes, no, stop, harder, softer, faster. Others never quite learn it, and instead communicate with looks, gestures, or sheer compliance. It's hard to argue with someone who owns you. There's something truly devastating about watching one of them try to adapt. You spot a girl in the corner of the courtyard, alone, practicing words under her breath. Not sweet nothings or poetry, no, she's repeating prices, positions, body parts. Her accent is thick, her tone flat, she's building herself into a product syllable by syllable, and the Romans are fine with this. In fact, they prefer it. There's something exotic about foreign flesh, it adds flavour. A twist of danger, a little distance from guilt. If you're sleeping with a local girl, you might run into her at the forum, but a Thracian slave? That's a story to tell your drinking buddies. It's conquest without leaving home. There's graffiti that reflects this. You spot one etched near the stairwell. I had a Syrian. She screamed like a goddess. Another says, the Greek was worth every denarius. These aren't reviews, they're trophies, souvenirs of subjugation, and it's not just about sex, it's about power. About turning a person into a fantasy and pretending that fantasy owes you something. Historians still argue over just how many sex workers in Rome were enslaved. Some suggest it was the overwhelming majority, especially in formal brothels like this one. Others argue that some were freed women or even born citizens who turned to the trade by necessity. But even if a few had freedom on paper, most had none in practice. Especially those who weren't even considered fully Roman in the eyes of the law. You duck into a quiet cubiculum and find a strange item under the bench. A small carved pendant, cheap wood, worn smooth. It's a figure, though not Roman. Not a god you recognise. Possibly from the East, something brought from a home. A talisman of protection, or maybe just memory. You imagine her fingers curling around it at night, long after the clients have gone, whispering prayers in a language no one here understands. The rooms of foreign girls are often decorated differently. A scrap of cloth with a colour from home, a stone or shell tucked into a corner, a name carved into the underside of the bed. Not for clients, this is for them. A piece of self preserved in the midst of erasure. And yet, despite this, some rise. A few become legends. There are stories of enslaved prostitutes who used their looks, wit, or sheer resilience to earn enough to buy freedom. One such woman, according to rumour, eventually became the mistress of a senator. She lived in a villa on the Palatine Hill and was buried in silk. But for every one of her, there are hundreds who died nameless, forgotten, dumped outside the city walls with the other undesirables. There's a perverse irony here. Rome loved Greek culture, Greek art, Greek literature, Greek philosophy, but Greek women, they were bought, sold, and broken just like the rest. Beauty was appreciated, then used, then discarded. You feel it every time you look into one of their faces and see that flicker of intelligence hiding behind the blankness. The part of them that knows this is all a lie, that if they'd been born 100 miles west, they'd be on the other side of the transaction. You wander back into the main corridor, head spinning. A girl brushes past you, tall and statuesque, her skin darker than the others, eyes sharp. Egyptian, maybe, or Nubian. The men are watching her. She's something special here, an exotic rarity. But the way she walks, that's someone who's already done the math. She knows she's being watched. She knows it's dangerous. She knows how to use it. You can't decide if that makes her powerful or just further trapped. And the really dark part, some of them start to believe the persona they've been forced to play, not because they want to, but because it's safer than resisting. If you convince yourself you enjoy it, maybe it hurts less. Maybe you can survive longer. Maybe the screams in the next room don't mean anything anymore. You stop and lean against a wall trying to process it all. The foreignness, the stripping away of culture, language and name, the way Rome swallowed people whole and turned them into function, into profit, into decor. You realise now that you were never meant to survive this night, not because of what's done to the body, but what's done to the soul. The constant unravelling of identity, the quiet daily death of memory. And you're still just passing through, but they never got to. It's sometime past midnight now, if time even matters in a place like this, and you've been in the Lupanar long enough that things start to lose their edges. The moaning blurs with laughter, footsteps blend into the low hum of voices, and your brain is beginning to make peace with the fact that this nightmare just keeps going. You catch yourself zoning out in front of yet another fresco, this one especially cracked and worn but unmistakably vulgar. It shows a man gripping a woman's hair while she arches backward over a stool, mouth open in something between pain and ecstasy. You blink at it, then glance at the narrow passage beside it where someone groans, loudly as if in parody. It's getting hard to tell what's real. And then you hear it, the whisper. That soft, sultry rasp that could only come from a trained professional, or someone who's very good at pretending. Quid vis, Dominus? What do you want, master? The question floats toward you from a darkened cubiculum, followed by a figure, barely lit, leaning in the doorway. Her voice is perfectly measured, musical, practiced like a spell. You step closer, not out of desire, but curiosity. It's the first time someone's addressed you directly, and what she says next is deeply Roman. Dis mihi, she says, smiling with only her mouth. Do you like the way Latin sounds in your ear? Then she whispers again, this time slow, dripping with sarcasm. Lingua longa dulcis. You get it. Dirty talk, Roman style. Except Roman dirty talk isn't what you think. It's not a series of cute, naughty phrases meant to get pulses racing. It's sharp, graphic, and often so poetic that it loops back around to being awkward. You're stepping into the bizarre world of ancient erotic language, and let's just say, subtlety is not on the menu. She starts listing things in Latin one by one, drawing them out like she's casting a spell. Lingua tua in ore meo, manus tuae inclune meo. You're trying to translate in your head, but let's be honest, you don't need to. The gestures fill in the blanks. It's explicit and weirdly clinical. There's no, I want you. It's, place your tongue here, your hand there, like you're both reenacting instructions from a manual. And the words themselves, brutal. Ancient Latin didn't have soft equivalents for pleasure or moan. It had military-grade verbs, words like futuo, which doesn't mean make love. It means something closer to pound into submission. Or landica, the Latin word for clitoris, which shows up in graffiti more often than you'd expect. There's even a documented insult that goes, cacator cave malum, crappy man beware of evil. Not exactly pillow talk. The Romans loved vulgarity, loved it. Their humour, their insults, even their poetry was laced with it. Look at Catullus, one of Rome's great lyric poets, who wrote entire verses about licking, sucking, and things that would make a modern sailor blush. To speak Latin fluently in a brothel meant knowing both the highbrow and the gutter tongue. You had to be fluent in filth. She leans closer now, breathing phrases against your ear, probably testing your reaction. Noli timere, parvule, faciam te virum. Don't be afraid, little one, I'll make you a man now. You try not to flinch. You're not sure if it's a threat or a joke. Possibly both. There's something surreal about being on the receiving end of Roman dirty talk. It's simultaneously formal and depraved, like being seduced by a lawyer mid-trial. And she's good at it. Not because she wants to be, but because it's her job. She's memorised lines, phrasing, rhythms, the way her voice lilts upward on certain syllables, the way she drops it to a hush when the hallway goes quiet. You realise now that this is just one more product being sold, the voice of the words, the illusion that she's enjoying this, that she picked you, that you're special and you're not. There's graffiti that proves it. On the far wall of the corridor, scratched in thick, angry strokes, someone wrote, Non loquitur sed gemit. She doesn't speak. She moans. Another line beneath it, in a different hand, Omnia simulat. She fakes it all. So even in this, in the sounds and whispers, there's deception. Performance, a routine polished like a stage act. But unlike a play, no one applauds when it's over. They toss a coin, sometimes not even that. You pass another cubiculum and hear a different kind of language. Greek, maybe, or Punic. The words are faster, softer, not meant for you. Probably not meant for anyone but the speaker herself. A chant, a prayer, or maybe just a lullaby from home sung under her breath as armour. Language here is weapon and shield, and the people forced to wield it have learned how to survive with every syllable. There's still academic debate about how accurate our understanding of ancient dirty talk really is. Much of what we know comes from graffiti, satire and poetry, all male perspectives, all filtered through class and ego. Did the women talk back? Did they whisper their own vulgarities? Or did they stay silent, staring at the ceiling counting heartbeats? We may never know. But the wall scribbles hint that some were fluent in this ugly music, that they fought fire with fire. You return to the courtyard, ears still ringing with her voice, that lilting, twisted Latin echoing in your head, the way she said dominus like it meant nothing, like it was just another sound in a long, endless list of noises made for money. The oil lamps are starting to dim. The air feels thicker, heavier, laced with smoke and sweat and the residue of every word whispered, in this place. You wonder if the walls remember, if the frescoes, with all their painted limbs and plastered expressions, are more honest than anything spoken aloud here. You take a long breath and try to let the voice fade, but it doesn't. Because that's the worst part. Roman dirty talk doesn't leave you aroused. It leaves you hollow. You've seen the workers, heard the groans, breathed the rot, watched the system churn. But now it's time to meet the man behind the curtain, or rather, the man sitting in the back room with a smug smile and fingers too clean to belong in this place. The brothel owner, the Leno, the puppet master. If you were expecting some greasy caricature with a whip and a devilish moustache, Rome doesn't do clichés. This guy looks like any middle-class merchant. Maybe a bit heavier than average, rings on his fingers, a purse tucked under his belt, a dagger at his side that probably hasn't left its sheath in years. He doesn't need to fight. He just needs to count. You catch a glimpse of him in the corner office. Well, office might be generous. It's a side room near the entrance, part storage, part surveillance post. He sits on a 3-legged stool with a clay tablet on his lap, stylus in hand, scratching away at the day's numbers. A few coins spill across the floor near his feet. He doesn't care. He's counting something bigger. Maybe which girl made the most coin today, maybe which client shorted him, maybe which foreign girl is finally broken in enough to raise her rate. He looks up. You freeze. He nods once, indifferent, already moving on. You're just another ghost floating through his empire of flesh. This man is not a criminal in the eyes of Roman law. Quite the opposite. He's a businessman. He pays taxes, files reports, keeps meticulous records. The state knows what he does and rewards him for doing it efficiently. It's all part of the system. Sex work in Rome is regulated like bread sales or donkey rentals. There's a category for it in the tax ledger, a set of licenses, a line item in the census, and this isn't his only brothel, probably. The successful Leno doesn't stake his fortune on one building. He might run a tavern nearby, a few rented rooms in the Subura, maybe even a small theatre where the performers double as escorts. He diversifies, manages supply chains. He's not interested in lust. He's interested in volume. You watch as one of the younger workers walks into his room. She holds out a small pouch, earnings from her clients tonight. He opens it, weighs it in his hand and nods. Doesn't say thank you. Doesn't ask how she is. Just jerks his head toward the next hallway. Back to work. The girl disappears into the shadows, shoulders low, feet silent. He doesn't look cruel, that's the worst part. He looks normal, bored even, like he's running a laundromat instead of a warehouse of human pain. Because this isn't sad to him. This is Tuesday. There's a piece of papyrus on his desk with a grid. Names in one column, tally marks in another. You recognise a few of the names from the graffiti. Marcia, Dione, Fortunata, each followed by marks scratched in quick strokes. 5 for one, 8 for another, 15 for the one he just nodded toward. Clients counted like loaves of bread or cattle. Some brothel owners brand their workers. You've read about it. Maybe seen the scars if you've looked closely enough. Letters burned into skin. Symbols pressed into thighs or shoulders. Marks of ownership. There's debate about whether this was required by law or just common practice. Some scholars argue it was a form of legal registration. Others call it pure sadism. Either way, it happened. A girl with a mark belonged to her Leno the same way his tunic or sandals did. Occasionally a Leno was a woman, called a Lena. These madams usually operated smaller brothels or specialised in high-end arrangements. But men dominated the business. And make no mistake, it was a business. The margins were incredible. The costs were low. Buy a girl once, feed her just enough to keep her alive, take every coin she earns. The profits? Daily. Predictable. Explosive during festivals. You peek further into the back room. There's a small shrine in the corner. Figures of Mercury, god of commerce, and Priapus, ever present in brothels, standing tall in every sense. Offerings litter the altar. Coins, dried herbs, bits of meat. He's covered all his bases: money, fertility, protection. He's not religious, he's superstitious. There's a difference. He doesn't care what happens to the girls, but he does care what happens to the profits. You wonder if he was ever poor, if he started as a guard, a bouncer, maybe even a client who saw an opportunity. It doesn't matter. Whatever he was, he's a master now. Not just of this brothel, but of the people inside it. The girls work for him, the guards report to him, the clients fear him or at least respect the reach of his purse. If a worker crosses him, she's gone, solely replacing. If a client causes too much trouble, maybe he gets a warning. Maybe he ends up face down in the alley behind the bathhouse. Depends on how much he owes. One of the quirks of this man's operation is the customer logbook, rare but not unheard of. A clay tablet used to record frequent clients, big spenders, troublemakers. There's even a rumour that a local magistrate appears on the list under a code name. Power protects power even when it's drunk and naked. The Leno scratches something into the tablet with a bored sigh. Another girl enters, crying silently, lips swollen. He doesn't look up. She places something on the table. A coin, a broken bracelet, a note. You can't tell. He waves her away. She leaves. No comfort. No punishment. Just efficiency. There's a theory among some scholars that brothel owners like this one saw themselves as community figures, providers of pleasure, regulators of vice. They controlled lust so others wouldn't have to. It's a twisted kind of civic pride, but mostly it's about control, about knowing the value of everybody under your roof and never letting that value drop. You finally turn away from his office, sick to your stomach, not because he shouted, not because he beat anyone, but because he didn't have to. Power doesn't need to raise its voice when the whole building breathes in your rhythm. Back in the hallway, you pass one of his guards, big, bored, arms crossed, face blank. You wonder how much he makes. Probably enough to keep quiet, not enough to care. The brothel keeps moving. Doors open and cloak, coins clink in bowls, voices rise and fall like hugged tidewater. And somewhere in the back, the Leno sits on his stool counting what's his. You included. If you've made it this far into the Roman brothel, congratulations, or maybe condolences, because now we're stepping into the part that fully peels back the last layers of decency. It's not just about sex anymore, it's about what kind of sex. The menu here isn't metaphorical, it's literal, painted on the walls, etched into clay tokens, whispered in hallways and sold with the same enthusiasm as olives in amphorae. And spoiler alert, it's not vanilla. In fact, the average Roman brothel menu makes modern kinks look like mild suggestions from a self-help book. You find yourself in another corridor now, narrower, darker, and with frescoes that take a definite turn toward the extreme. One image shows a man tied to a post grinning while a woman raises a whip. Another has two women and a man in a tangle of limbs that would require a diagram and a chiropractor. You can't stop staring, not because it's erotic, but because it's surreal. These aren't vague ideas of sex, they're instructions, service listings. A menu in a brothel wasn't about food, but it followed the same logic. Choice, price, and presentation. Each act had a value. Oral sex, cheap common, anal sex, pricier, group sex, very expensive. Public sex, often offered during festivals, when inhibitions were low and pockets full of wine money. The wall paintings were coded in a way both obvious and deliberately theatrical. You weren't just buying pleasure, you were buying a fantasy, a role, a script. Some brothels even offered themes: the innocent maiden, the exotic foreigner, the dominatrix. Yes, seriously. You overhear a client negotiating down the hallway. Duas posiciones pro uno denario? 2 positions for 1 denarius? The girl laughs, not because it's funny, but because she's heard it 100 times today already. She says something back you don't catch, but the tone is flat, tired. This isn't a performance anymore. It's haggling over her body, and here's where things get uncomfortable. Well, more uncomfortable. Because Romans didn't draw lines the same way modern sensibilities do. What's considered taboo now, certain acts, certain ages, certain levels of consent, was often shrugged off or even celebrated then. Take bestiality, for example. It's rare, but in certain upper-class circles, references exist, performed more as shock theatre than actual practice. But the fact that it made it into elite Roman jokes tells you something. Or the practice of eromatio, a forced form of oral sex that was less about pleasure and more about domination. And yes, that too shows up in frescoes and graffiti. Some clients came in not just seeking sex, but power. The act itself became secondary. What mattered was how much you could control, how much pain you could inflict, how much you could degrade. Some workers were chosen not for beauty, but for how convincingly they could cry. There's even a recorded graffito boasting, "She begged me to stop, I didn't." That's not just horrifying. That's a line scratched into a public wall where anyone could read it, like a badge of pride. Of course, there were clients who asked for the opposite. Gentle sessions, kisses, whispered words, and there's graffiti of that too. "She kissed me like a wife." It's a strange request in a world so utterly transactional. Some men didn't want power. They wanted softness for just a moment, a lie they could pretend to believe. Still, the most popular items on the Roman brothel menu weren't just about mechanics. They were about novelty. Men sought what they couldn't or wouldn't ask for at home. Romans believed the purpose of marriage was for procreation. Love, lust and experimentation, those belonged in the Lupanar, not the bedroom. Your wife was for producing heirs, your mistress was for showing off. The brothel, huh? That was your real playground. You see a man stumbling out of a room, flushed and laughing, belt in hand. Behind him the girl is limping, rubbing her shoulder. He slaps a coin into the bowl on the wall and disappears down the hall. No one bats an eye. You start to feel your pulse rising. Not in fear, but in rage. There's no punishment here for cruelty. There's only pay-per-view brutality, and the client paid. A detail some visitors miss is how sensory the experience was. The menu wasn't just visual, it was tactile, auditory, olfactory. Certain girls wore perfumes from distant provinces. Others were instructed to speak in specific accents, or none at all. Some were trained to moan a certain way, or not at all, depending on the act. Every detail was fine-tuned for the client's tastes. And again, the workers didn't get to choose. Their preferences didn't matter. Their comfort wasn't on the menu. There's a legend about a particularly high-end brothel in Rome that offered a night of madness package. You paid triple the normal rate, and for one night you got anything you wanted. No questions, no rules. It was popular with visiting dignitaries, young nobles, and men whose souls were already half devoured by ambition. There's no archaeological proof it existed, but the story lives in writings, repeated just enough to seem plausible. If true, it was likely just one more iteration of Rome's favourite vice, indulgence without consequence. You pass another fresco and pause. This one's different. It shows a man and a woman lying face to face. Nothing exaggerated. No ropes, no threesomes, no violence. Just them, touching, looking at each other. The painting's older than the rest. Faded and crumbling. Almost forgotten. You wonder if it survived by accident. If it was painted before the brothel turned into the factory it is now. Before the menu got longer. Before novelty meant pushing everything to its furthest edge. Some historians believe these paintings weren't just menus, but instructions, especially for workers who didn't speak Latin or were too young to be told aloud. A picture's worth 1,000 denarii, right? It sounds absurd, but consider the environment. Speed, noise, language barriers, constant turnover. A visual code makes twisted sense. Even now you can feel the efficiency. One glance at a wall, a nod from the client, a sigh from the worker. Transaction complete. You step away from the wall queasy. Not just from what's offered here, but from how ordinary it is. You came in expecting depravity, and you found it. But the real horror is how casual it all is. There are no secret passwords, no shame, no hidden rooms with red curtains, just price, product and performance. You look back down the corridor, and the whole place feels like a marketplace now. Not of goods, of possibilities. Every fresco another stall, every room another flavour. The brothel doesn't care what you want, it just wants to sell it to you. Whether it breaks someone or not its problem, and you're no longer shocked. That should terrify you. You can feel it in your skin now, something crawling just beneath the surface. Not fear exactly, not even disgust, it's something more primal. That itchy awareness that you're surrounded by sickness and numbers, and that some part of it might have already made its way inside you. There's no escaping it in this place. You've touched the walls, sat on the stone beds, breathed the same foul air, and now you're starting to wonder what else might be clinging to your body, hitchhiking through time with all the tenacity of a Roman skin might. Because if there's one thing you definitely take home from a night in a Roman brothel, it's disease. That's not even up for debate. You wouldn't just leave this place feeling used and empty, you'd leave infected. With what, you ask? Oh, take your pick. The Roman brothel was less a pleasure house and more a bubbling cauldron of plague-like pathogens, ripe for the picking. And protection? Forget it. The closest thing to a condom was a superstition. First off, let's talk about Cupid's disease. No, it's not cute. It's syphilis, in its early brutal form. Though to be fair, there's still scholarly debate over whether the specific bacterium existed in Rome or arrived later from the New World. But Rome had its own bouquet of horrors. Venereal diseases were definitely present. And whatever they called it, morbus venereus or the fiery itch, it was everywhere. And here in the brothel it didn't just spread, it festered. Your skin starts to crawl thinking about it. Imagine a place with no antiseptics, no antibiotics, no hand-washing protocols, just warm, moist stone rooms recycled all day with fresh sweat, spit, blood and worse. If someone had a skin infection, guess what? Now you do too. If someone had lice, congratulations, you're itching now. Pubic lice was so common that a specific oil mix was sold in the markets to treat them, and it didn't work. Ancient delousing was more like wishful thinking rubbed on with a rag. You pause near a crack basin in the corner of a hallway. Water drips slowly from a crude pipe, pooling into a grimy ceramic bowl. A rag sits nearby, soaked with something dark, probably wine. Hopefully not blood, this is the closest thing the workers have to hygiene. This and a bowl of ashes sometimes used to scrub between clients. No soap, no boiling water, just ash and prayer. You overhear two women arguing in whispers. One is pointing to her thigh, visibly inflamed. The other shakes her head, mutters something about ignis sacer, sacred fire. That was one of many euphemisms for infections they couldn't name or treat. You'd recognise it now as herpes, chlamydia, maybe something even worse. They recognise it as a curse from Venus, which is tragic considering Venus is the very goddess they're supposed to serve here. And yes, Roman doctors existed. Galen, Celsus, all those names you half remember from textbooks. But brothel workers didn't get the good doctors. They got folk remedies, old women with jars of herbs, and whatever their Leno could find for cheap. Some treatments made it worse. Mercury ointments that corroded the skin, poultices made with lead powder, warm vinegar douches, which sound halfway decent until you remember how impure Roman water was to begin with. Then there's pregnancy, which is practically a certainty if you stay here long enough. And trust me, you do not want to give birth in a Roman brothel. If you think the beds are bad for sex, imagine labouring on one. There's no midwife unless someone drags one in from the street, no clean linens, no place to scream where someone won't bang on the wall and tell you to shut up. If the child survives, and that's a very big if, it usually doesn't stay. Infants born in brothels were often sold, abandoned, or quietly buried out back. There are records of baby skeletons found in sewer drains behind Roman brothels, curled like vergitten laundry. The real kicker: some of these diseases weren't even blamed on the clients, they were blamed on the women, as if the girls were the source of infection, not the endless parade of sweaty men dragging half the city's bacteria in with them. There's even a graffito that says, "Beware of Thelxinoe, she burns like fire." As if Thelxinoe is an arsonist, not a victim. She probably had to keep working through it anyway. She probably died with her thighs still raw and her name still scratched into that wall like a warning label. You feel it in your throat now, the dryness, the tightness. Just standing here makes your lungs ache a little. The air is thick with mould and human particles, and if you think respiratory illness couldn't spread in a place like this, guess again. Rome had no shortage of airborne diseases. Tuberculosis, a classic. Pneumonia, constant. Add in smoke from oil lamps, poor ventilation, and 1,000 shared breaths. And this brothel becomes a petri dish with phallic decorations. Some fringe historians even speculate that certain plagues may have been accelerated by urban sex work. Though, of course, that's debated. Still, there's something chilling about the idea of a man catching more than satisfaction in a brothel, then heading back to his tenement and sharing it with a family of 8. The spread wasn't just physical, it was generational. You duck into another cubiculum, mostly to breathe, or try to. This one smells strongly of myrrh, an attempt at perfume or ritual cleansing. You spot a small bowl of crushed herbs near the head of the bed. Some believed that sage and wormwood could protect against infection. Others swore by wine-soaked wool. You'd have better luck with a salt circle and a desperate prayer. And yet, through all this, the system continues. The brothel doesn't slow down for infections. A girl with sores still works. A boy with a cough still gets hired. There are no sick days here, only days you earn the less. When you finally collapse, someone else steps in, and the Leno doesn't blink. His money flows either way. You remember now that smell from earlier? The sharp, sour note behind the sweat and incense. That was rot. Infection. A body giving up cell by cell. You didn't notice it at first, because it blends so well into the background. But now it's all you can smell. Disease isn't the exception in this place. It's the atmosphere, and the longer you stay, the more certain you are. You've caught something. It might not show up for days, might just be in your head, but you know, your body knows, no one survives this night untouched. You're not sure what's worse, the fact that you're still in this place, or that some part of you has started to adjust. The smell? Still horrible, but now it's familiar. The sounds? Still jarring, but no longer shocking. You've started to register the rhythms of the brothel like a perverse metronome. Footsteps, grunts, laughter steer, coin, silence, repeat. And as you lean against a scorched wall near a flickering lamp, trying not to breathe too deeply, another thought creeps in. How did anyone survive this without getting pregnant? The short answer? They didn't. Not often. Pregnancy in a Roman brothel was more common than clean drinking water, and it came with none of the glowing metaphors you're used to. There were no baby showers, no glowing mothers-to-be humming lullabies. Just fear, shame, and an impossible choice between continued labour and something else. You overhear 2 women talking in whispers behind a tattered curtain. One clutches her belly, not obviously swollen yet, but you can see the anxiety leaking out of her pores. The other murmurs something soothing, then hands over a small cloth-wrapped bundle. It smells sharp, like bitter herbs, and something metallic. You already know what it is. Roman birth control wasn't exactly cutting edge. It was guesswork and folklore, heavy on desperation and low on science. There was silphium, the famed herbal contraceptive from Cyrene, rumoured to be so effective that the plant was harvested into extinction. A drop of it, they said, and you'd be safe. Except by the time of the Empire it was already gone, and anything sold as silphium by street vendors was probably just parsley in a fancier jar. Other women relied on wild rue, pennyroyal, or Queen Anne's lace, plants with real though unpredictable abortive properties. The problem? Dosage. Take too little and nothing happens. Take too much and you're not just killing the pregnancy, you're killing yourself. Internal bleeding, liver failure, cardiac arrest, all dressed up as herbal remedy. Then there's the real horror show, lead. Yes, lead. Roman physicians sometimes recommended consuming it, believing it could cool the womb. Rich women sipped wine stored in lead containers, thinking it made them elegant. Sex workers? They drank concoctions of vinegar and powdered lead scrapings from pipes. It might have reduced fertility. It also destroyed their kidneys, their minds, and in some cases, their lives. You move toward a low bench near the courtyard where a small group of girls sit, sharing a drink from a battered cup. It's hot, herbal, and smells like desperation. One of them is maybe 16 and she cradles the cup like it's hope itself. She doesn't talk, doesn't smile, she just drinks, eyes fixed on the stones at her feet, like she's waiting for something, relief or regret. In the far corner of the room is an ancient clay jug labelled in red paint. You squint. It says Fermentum Feminarum, women's ferment. It was a crude contraceptive gel made of wine sediment, olive oil, resin, and sometimes honey. It was supposed to be inserted before sex, forming a barrier. Did it work? Probably about as well as a wet leaf, but not all Roman methods were physical. Some women turned to magic. They'd wear amulets tied around their thighs or hang tiny bones from their necks, often shaped like frogs, wolves, or hands making rude gestures. You spot one such charm nailed into a cubiculum wall, a carved wooden hand with 2 fingers extended, the Roman equivalent of a middle finger crossed with a ward against evil. Protection through pettiness. There's still debate among historians about how widespread birth control was in the ancient world. Some argue Roman women had a decent understanding of their cycles and used a combination of withdrawal and timing. Others say that's modern romanticism. The evidence is patchy, drawn from medical texts written by men who weren't exactly known for consulting the women themselves. What we do know is that the need was real, and so was the danger of trying. You see it in the shadows. The woman hunched in the corner, whispering feverish prayers, the stain on the stone that someone tried to scrub away with sand, the faint sound of crying that cuts through even the thickest incense. And when pregnancy did happen, and it always did, it was rarely celebrated. Some girls were forced to work through it, their swelling bellies hidden under loose tunics or explained away as gluttony. Others disappeared. Where? That's the question. Some were sold to clients with a maternal fetish. Some sent to rural brothels, far from the city's judging eyes. A few might have been allowed to give birth, though allowed is generous. The infant might be taken, sold or exposed, left outside the city walls to die from cold, hunger or animals. Infant exposure wasn't considered murder in Roman law, it was simply a decision. If a child wasn't claimed by a father, it could be legally abandoned, especially if the child was ill, deformed, or most often female. Brothels sometimes left unwanted babies in the same alleys their clients stumbled through. The idea that a client might pass his own child in the street without ever knowing is not just tragic, it's standard. One fringe theory suggests some brothels ran informal nurseries to raise the daughters of prostitutes until they were old enough to join the trade themselves. It's not well documented, but it wouldn't surprise you. After all, this entire place runs on cycles: need, use, discard, repeat. Why not start grooming the next generation early? You lean against the wall and try not to fall apart. Not because the information is new, but because the reality is so deeply relentless. There's no break in the suffering, no sanctuary. Even biology betrays them. A womb becomes a liability. A period becomes a punishment. A child becomes a death sentence. And through it all, the brothel keeps working. The doors don't close for a miscarriage. The line of clients doesn't slow for a girl too dizzy from pennyroyal to stand. The Leno still demands his cut. The gods still demand their offerings. Life goes on, and so does the business. You push away from the bench and glance one last time at the girl with the herbal drink. She's not crying. She's not trembling. She just waits, quiet and still, like she's done this before, like she knows exactly how it ends. You wonder if she'll survive the night. Then you remember where you are. She's not the one who won't make it out. There's a point where your eyes just stop adjusting. The darkness no longer feels like an absence of light, but a permanent veil. Something sticky and enmeshable indoor. It clings to your skin, curls around your ankles, muffles the air itself. And still in this low murk, the brothel keeps breathing, quietly, steadily, like some beast that doesn't sleep. You find yourself drawn toward one of the oil lamps lodged into the stone wall. The flame dancing like it's had too much to drink. It's beautiful in a way, a fragile little shimmer trying to keep 1,000 years of filth at bay. Spoiler, it's not winning. Roman brothels didn't have windows. Privacy wasn't the concern, no, that was far too modern a concept. It was about economy. Wall space was for paintings, doorways were for watching, ventilation, an afterthought if that. So oil lamps were everything. Your light source, your heat, your atmosphere, and also, occasionally, your fire hazard. And they were everywhere, casting that low golden glow that made everything look just a little softer, a little warmer, and maybe, if you squinted hard enough, a little more bearable. But these lamps weren't flickering in silence. No, they hummed. Not audibly, this isn't a Pixar short, but symbolically. Every flame lit in this place had already burned through countless nights, soaked up the sweat and the screams and the prayers that never quite reached the ceiling. You stand there inches from one now, watching how the flame dips each time someone walks past, as if even fire hesitates here. The lamp itself is carved clay, shaped like a leaf or maybe a foot. Hard to tell anymore. It's blackened at the spout from years of overuse, and you can smell the oil, thick, smoky, slightly rancid. It's not olive oil like you'd drizzle on bread. This is industrial-grade stuff, made from the dregs. It burns long, but not clean. The air in the brothel is never entirely breathable. Your lungs already feel heavy. One of the workers passes by, pauses to adjust the wick. She uses a long, thin iron rod, black with soot, slick with old oil, and nudges the flame like it's a pet. Then she glances at you, shrugs and moves on. You want to ask her something, but what could you possibly say? Nice ambience? She'd laugh, or maybe she wouldn't. She probably doesn't care anymore. Lighting mattered here. The dim glow helped hide bruises, concealed the filth, made tired eyes look like bedroom glances, and stone slabs look like cozy beds. In this light, no one is ugly, no one is exhausted, no one is bleeding. In this light, even lies look beautiful. You wander deeper into the hallway, squinting now. The further you go, the dimmer it gets. Some lamps are nearly out, little more than a thread of orange in the dark. Others burn too brightly, their flames leaping unnaturally from overfilled basins, casting monstrous pour-downs across the walls. There's no uniformity, no system. It's all improvised. And then you hear it. A loud clatter, followed by a sudden whoosh. Someone's knocked over a lamp. The fire jumps instantly, licking up the dry linen of a discarded tunic. The flames race like they've been waiting all night for this exact moment. For a few seconds, the hallway erupts in orange chaos. Bright, dangerous, honest. You see everything in that flash. The cracked floors, the blood stains on the wall, the terrified face of a worker too close to the heat. Then hands rush in. A bucket appears from nowhere. Someone kicks the fabric. Another smothers the flame with a wet rag. The fire dies. The light vanishes. Everything goes quiet again. No one screams. No one even gasps. Just a few muttered curses and the shuffling of feet. You stand frozen, heart pounding, but around you the building exhales and keeps going. This wasn't the first fire. It won't be the last. The oil lamps giveth, and the oil lamps taketh away. It makes sense when you think about it. Fire was constant in ancient Rome. Cooking, heating, lighting, everything involved flame. And brothels with their cramped halls and flammable fabrics were kindling, waiting for a spark. Pompeii itself, the very city you're visiting, burned more than once before the volcano finally sealed its fate. And fire here, fire is just another occupational hazard. Like disease, like pregnancy, like heartbreak. You edge back toward the courtyard, the smell of burnt cloth still in your nostrils. Someone's relighting the fallen lamp. They tilt it, refill the basin with more thick oil from a jar, and spark it with a coal from a nearby brazier. The fire sputters, catches, flickers back to life. No ceremony, no thanks, just business as usual. There's something eerily symbolic in that. The fire falls. It rises again. No one leaves. No one stops. The whole brothel, like the oil lamps themselves, runs on fuel no one talks about. Desperation, repetition, burnout. You get the sense that everyone here is just trying not to go out completely. Just keep the wick trimmed. Just keep the flame from molten spilling. You glance up at the ceiling, not that you can see much of it, but the parts that are visible are blackened with soot. Centuries of smoke have stained every inch. The frescoes here are darker, not just by age, but by heat. The gods painted above, Venus, Priapus, even Mars, are barely visible now, hidden behind the residue of too many nights and too few breaks. There's a small shrine near one of the lamps, a crude niche carved into the wall. Inside, a wax figure melts in slow drips, probably meant to represent a household deity. Or maybe it's just a lump of forgotten ritual. Either way, it looks exhausted, like even the gods are tired of watching this place. One scholar once argued that oil lamps in brothels were deliberately dimmed to make clients feel braver. Less guilty, less seen. It's a compelling theory. In the dark, everyone's a little more animal. You can convince yourself you're not responsible, that it's just play acting, just impulse. No one can see the look on your face, not clearly, not fully. That's why the lamps flicker instead of blaze. Not to guide, to blur. You take one final look at the nearest flame, hypnotized by how it wavers. It doesn't dance, it struggles. Just like everything in this place, it burns out of habit, not desire. And you realize, so do you. The oil is low now. The shadows grow again. You wonder if they'll notice if the next flame doesn't come back. At this point, you've seen enough to know that nothing is off limits here. But you still haven't reached the true theatre of homosexuality. Not the tired grunt work of pleasure for coin. Not even the bruised glamour of a painted wall menu. You haven't yet brushed against the twisted edge of what made Roman brothels tick beneath the surface. The kinks, the compulsions, the taboos that weren't really taboos at all. This is where the line between desire and spectacle blurs so completely, you can't even pretend it's about intimacy anymore. It's pageantry, power, performance, and the Romans were Olympic-level performers. You follow a passage that curves behind the main cubiculums, narrower than the rest, and lit with fewer oil lamps. This is where the more specialised services took place. The usual moans and sighs fade here, replaced by rhythmic thuds, low murmurs, and the occasional unmistakable sound of a whip cracking through the thick, smoky air. Not playfully, not gently. You pause, unsure if you've stumbled into a punishment or a request. Then someone chuckles behind a door, a soft, satisfied breath. The crack again. Kinks weren't whispered secrets in Rome, they were standard features. You wanted to pretend you were a gladiator, fresh off a win and drunk with triumph done. You wanted to roleplay as a runaway slave being captured. There's someone on staff who knows the lines and the posture. You wanted to be fed by a naked servant while being called Dominus over and over. Please take a seat and remove your sandals. The irony is that Roman society was rigidly hierarchical. Everything was about class, gender, status. But in the brothel, those lines became costumes. And sometimes people came here not to reinforce power, but to escape it. A magistrate paying to be chained up and shouted at by a girl half his size, not uncommon. A merchant pretending he's the submissive one, happens every festival season. Because in this world the kink isn't just the act, it's the reversal. There's graffiti here to prove it. You pass one etched into a plaster wall. Felix loved to be beaten. 5 lashes, 1 denarius. Another reads, Domitius spat in my face. I paid double. These aren't jokes, they're receipts. Proof that even in the most repressive society, desire finds its cracks to slip through. One girl you pass is dressed differently. She's taller, more poised, wearing a red ribbon in her hair, an ancient signal. She makes eye contact, smirks, leans against the doorway and runs a wooden rod across her palm slowly, like she's inviting you to play a very different kind of game. She doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. Her presence says everything. She is not here to be taken. She is here to take you. The Romans had a complicated relationship with dominance and submission. On the one hand, they worshipped power. On the other, they ritualized its surrender. Certain festivals, like Saturnalia, reversed social roles. Masters served slaves. Children ordered around adults. And those dynamics bled into sex, of course. The bedroom became another stage for role inversion. Only here it came with ropes of scripts and bruises you didn't talk about the next morning. You duck into one of the more theatrical rooms, if you can call it that. It's slightly larger than the standard cubiculum, but the bed is the same cold slab. What's different are the props. Chains on the wall, a short wooden bench, a cracked bronze mirror positioned at just the right angle. There are feathers, there are paddles, there's even what looks like a carved phallus mounted to a stone base. Decorative or practical? Hard to say. Probably both. There's no question that the Romans explored fetishes in ways that still surprise modern historians. Foot fetishes, for instance, were wildly common. Some men wrote poems dedicated to a woman's toes. Others collected sandals like trophies. One graffito reads, "Lupina's feet are softer than Venus herself." You want to roll your eyes, but then again you've seen worse tonight. Then there's the hair obsession. Curly, long, foreign. Hair had erotic currency. One man supposedly paid extra to have a girl braid his before and after the act. Another, if you believe the gossip etched into the walls, asked only to lie beneath her hair like a curtain while she sang. But not all kinks were so benign. Some were dark, cruel. There's a reason so many brothel frescoes feature pain with pleasure. A reason why screams here blend so easily into laughter. The line isn't blurred, it's obliterated. The safe word in a Roman brothel wasn't a word at all. It was whether you had enough coin to make someone stop. You pass a man now, half-dressed, grinning, as he walks down the corridor with a welt rising along his cheekbone. He looks satisfied, maybe proud. Behind him, the girl, older than most, wipes something from her hand with a cloth that might have once been white. She doesn't look at him. She doesn't look at you. Her face is neutral, unreadable. She's done her job, the show's over. There's an open, scholarly debate about whether these kinks were personal expressions or social commentary. Was the act of being dominated a secret protest against an empire obsessed with order? Or was it just another flavour of indulgence? Some believe the popularity of power reversal in the brothel hinted at cracks in the Roman psyche, a society built on control that secretly craved release. Others say it was simply boredom. You try sleeping in a stone bed every night and not getting creative. The language around these acts was telling. There was no single term for kink, but there were euphemisms. A luxurious man wasn't just rich, he was decadent, indulgent, likely into exotic entertainments. A lenocinium could refer to brothel management, but also the act of enabling someone's twisted desires. And then there was perversitas, a word rarely used but unmistakable. It meant crossing the natural order. But who decided what was natural in a place where a man could ask to be walked on like a rug and get a receipt for it? You reach the end of the passage and come across a small table of objects. Tools, maybe, or toys, hard to say. There's a curved bronze blade, not sharpened, just ceremonial. A pair of bells, a mask shaped like a dog, a whip with silver thread woven into the leather. Each item speaks volumes, and none of them seem out of place. You step back trying to process it all. The rooms. The symbols, the way desire here is less about sex and more about stories. Control me, worship me, ignore me, hurt me, save me. Every kink is a script waiting to be acted out. And the brothel is just the theatre where no one has to admit they're playing a role, except the workers. Their role isn't a performance, it's survival. And you're still the audience. But now the lights are too dim to pretend this is just entertainment. You don't even notice when you start running your fingers along the walls. It's almost unconscious now. Something about the coolness of the stone beneath your hand makes you feel tethered. But the surface isn't smooth. It's cracked, carved with lines and words and little jagged hearts. Not decoration, not history. These are voices, etched deep, layered over each other like bark on an old tree, graffiti, the original social media. And in here it's not just messages, it's confessions, reviews, warnings, petty revenge, and dirty jokes that haven't aged a day. You pause at one that says, "Felix screwed Fortunata here, she moaned like a goddess." It's written in blocky Latin, with the kind of casual pride you'd expect from a man who thought the act alone deserved a plaque. Just below it, in smaller handwriting, someone added, "She charged double because he couldn't finish." That's the thing about these walls. No one gets the last word. You keep reading. Myrtis has soft lips. Cassia likes it rough. I visited Domitilla 3 times. She made me believe in the gods again. Is any of it true? Who knows? That's not really the point. The walls remember everything, whether it happened or not. In this place, rumour is fact until someone bothers to scratch over it. Roman graffiti wasn't considered vandalism, it was communicant. In a society without paper posters, Yelp reviews or midnight tweets, the brothel walls became the bulletin board of the underground. You could praise a lover, slander a rival, brag, confess, even philosophise. There's one scribble, barely visible now, that reads, "What is pleasure if not the trick of a lonely mind?" That's either a deep thought or the most exhausted prostitute in Pompeii trying to stay sane. You round a corner and find a fresher stretch of plaster, newer looking, like it survived the ash with less wear. Here, the carvings are denser, more chaotic, and names upon names. Little crude drawings of male anatomy, dozens of them, each more enthusiastically disproportionate than the last. It's like a contest no one wins. Some scholars say these phallic doodles were meant to bring good luck or ward off evil. Others just call it ancient trolling. There's a crude sketch of a man kneeling before a woman, both smiling. Beneath it, someone has scratched the words, "This happened, I was there." You have to admire the honesty, or the delusion. But not all the graffiti is light-hearted. You find one message that says, "She cried and I stayed. I shouldn't have." Another, "He didn't pay. Tell the next girl." Some marks are just names repeated over and over again, like a chant or a desperate attempt to make someone remember them. Livia, Livia, Livia. Then a chill goes down your spine. You find a handprint, not painted, pressed, as if someone long ago braced herself against the wall during a moment she couldn't bear. The fingers are slender, the palm broad, it's not perfectly formed, just a faded outline, but you can almost see the pressure behind it. Not an artistic expression, a physical reaction. Pain, or resistance, or something else you don't want to name. One fringe theory claims that a brothel graffiti served not just as casual commentary, but as documentation, a secret ledger of who came and went, what was done, and how it felt. For the workers who couldn't write, it was a form of resistance. A way to mark their stories without asking permission. That handprint? That might have been the only way she ever left something behind. You continue along the wall, and the stories keep coming. Some of them contradict each other in hilarious ways. One man writes, "Flavia is the best I've ever had." Right below, someone else, "Flavia picks her teeth with your coin." Ouch! You spot an entire argument carved into a small rectangle of plaster. It starts with, "Secundus was here and left satisfied." The next line says, "Secundus couldn't even find the right hole." The final line simply reads, "Ask Fortunata, she knows." It's like a Reddit thread, only meaner and carved with a nail. A surprising number of messages aren't from clients, they're from the workers themselves. Sometimes simple notes, "Today was quiet," or more defiant ones, "I chose this name, not him." Occasionally, even humour. "He asked me to pretend I was his wife. I told him to go home." You begin to notice patterns in the writing. Certain names show up again and again, not just the famous ones, like Fortunata and Myrtis, but the less flashy, the ones etched more gently, with more care. Silana sang to me after. I think Tertia really listened. It makes you wonder, were these real connections? Could they have been? Or was it just another layer of the performance? Then there's the art. Not the commissioned wall frescoes, that was branding. This is different. Carvings in the corners, barely visible, little suns, eyes, the occasional spiral, symbols that may have meant protection or simply filled the time between clients. Some girls drew birds, others drew stars. A few scratched tally marks into the stone, hundreds of them. You stop counting after 30, and you wonder, were they marking days, clients, attempts to remember who they were? One etching shows a house, tiny, simple, stench. A crude door, 2 dots for windows. Underneath, one day, just that. 2 words and a dream that probably never came true. The wall near the exit bears one of the most famous pieces of graffiti in Pompeii's Lupanar. You reach it now, it reads, "Weep you who read this, for I was once free." No name, no date, just a cry carved into stone, a long scream held in time. You step back and look at the full wall, seeing it not as individual messages, but as one collective voice. A chorus of exhaustion, humour, pain, bitterness, hope. These weren't nameless people. No matter how much Rome tried to make them vanish behind price tags and titles, they wrote themselves into the walls because they knew no one else would. And you're just passing through. They were stuck here. Yet somehow they left more behind than most people ever will. The light flickers, the flame stutters, but the words stay. You hear them before you see them. Heavy footsteps echoing down the stone corridor like a drumbeat. Uneven, rhythmic, unmistakable. Sandals slapping the floor, iron on leather, the sound of someone large and confident and probably half drunk. Then comes the voice, low, booming, slurred. Not Latin, not exactly. Something rougher, with hard consonants and too much laughter at his own joke. You back against the wall instinctively, and that's when they appear, the gladiators. Of all the types of clients who passed through the Lupanar, these were the ones who came with a soundtrack. Not silent, shamefaced husbands slipping in after dark. Not quiet, hunched-over slaves with pocket coins and trembling hands. Gladiators came loud, came limping, came bleeding, came laughing like they were already dead, and nothing mattered anymore. And sometimes they came with fans, persistens. The first one you see is built like a marble statue that's been left out in the rain, muscle-bound, scarred, and missing 2 fingers. His tunic is half-tied, blood drying in streaks down one arm, and a laurel crown sits crookedly on his head like he won it in a game he barely remembers. He ducks under a low arch, nearly hits his head, then lifts a full amphora of wine to his lips like it's water, and the fire inside him isn't already burning from the inside out. Behind him are 2 more, one younger, twitchier, eyes darting like he's waiting for someone to attack, the other older, silent, with the blank stare of a man who's either killed recently or plans to soon. They don't look like friends, they look like men who've bled in the sand together and decided not to question why. They stop in the courtyard, and the mood shifts, subtle but immediate. You can feel it in the air. Workers glance, then look away. Some disappear into the halls, others straighten their backs and smooth their tunics. Gladiators are both threat and opportunity. Their presence means coin, attention, sometimes even protection. It also means chaos, sometimes violence. Occasionally, something worse. The man with the laurel crown bellows, "Ubi est Fortunata?" Where's Fortunata? A name that echoes through the brothel like a challenge. He slams the wine amphora down on a table, spilling half of it. One of the guards, usually indifferent, steps a little closer, just in case. Here's the thing. Gladiators weren't just warriors. They were celebrities. Especially in a city like Pompeii, where the games were as beloved as bread. These men lived short, brutal lives, and the few who lived long enough to walk again were treated like living gods. Poor boys who became symbols. Killers turned heartthrobs. They were slaves, yes, but slaves with fans, with groupies, with women who paid for them. It's one of the more unexpected truths about Roman brothels. The workers weren't always the only ones on the clock. Sometimes, during festivals or after a particularly dramatic fight, a gladiator might be bought for the night, hired out by his lanista, his owner and trainer, to rich women or well-paying patrons. In those cases, he'd take on the role usually reserved for the girls, perform, flatter, submit. Not that they always did. Gladiators weren't known for gentle obedience. One famous graffito found near a Pompeii arena reads, "Celadus the Thracian makes all the girls sigh." Another, "Crescence is the delight of the noble women." These weren't lies. These men walked into brothels like they owned them, even when they didn't own the tunics on their backs. And sometimes the women came to them. You spot one now, an upper-class Roman matron, eyes dark with coal, fingers heavy with rings, her stola pulled just low enough to make a statement. She glides through the side door like she's entering her private villa, not the back end of a wolf's den, and she heads straight for the gladiator with the crown. She doesn't speak. She lifts her hand, brushes his shoulder, where the scar splits his skin. He grins, grabs her wrist, and pulls her down beside him. The way he touches her is rough, sure, expected. The way she looks at him, like she's seeing a ghost she once loved and couldn't save. It's not lust, it's nostalgia. And maybe a little bit of guilt. Some Roman women visited brothels. Not many. It was frowned upon, of course, but not impossible. Especially for wealthy widows, older women of status, or the exceptionally bold. They came for a night without rules, without judgment. They came to forget that at home they were silent shadows behind their husbands' reputations. Here they could speak, choose, command, be someone else entirely. The gladiator lifts her hand to his lips, kisses her fingers one by one like he's doing a bit. And maybe he is. but you sense a strange electricity between them, something familiar. Maybe she's been here before, maybe she requested him, maybe this isn't a one-night thing, and then you realise this is her escape too. The younger gladiator wanders into a side room with a girl not much older than he is. They don't talk. She leads, he follows, he closes the curtain. That's it. Just a moment, a shadow, and then silence. You turn back to the courtyard. Laurel Crown is laughing again, this time with wine in his beard and the matron on his lap. It's not graceful, it's not romantic. It's raw, desperate, a last taste of something before the arena calls again. Because he knows. They all do. No matter how much they worship it, how many names get scratched into walls about their strength and stamina, they don't last. A broken leg, a bad match, a new favourite. The arena is always hungry. There's a myth that gladiators bled during sex, that their wounds opened, that their bodies were too broken to perform gently. You don't know if that's true, but you believe it, because nothing about them is untouched. Everything about them is frayed at the edges, beauty wrapped in bandages. Power on borrowed time, you back away giving them space, though you're not sure why. It's not your scene, you're just another face in the background. Another spectator watching someone else's story play out in candlelight and half-remembered names. As you turn the corner, you spot a fresh carving on the wall. I kissed a god, and he tasted like blood. You don't know who wrote it. Doesn't matter. It's true either way. And behind you, the laughter continues. For now. You don't realise how tense your bodies become until something slams nearby. A door, a fist, maybe a shoulder against a wall, and your muscles flinch like you're trying to escape your own skin. That's the kind of place this is. The kind where safety isn't a guarantee, it's a momentary illusion. You've seen the workers, the clients, the games they play, the kinks they pay for. But what you haven't quite absorbed until now is that this entire place is a powder keg. The brothel isn't just a market of flesh, it's a battlefield with poor lighting. There's a guard posted at the main hallway. You've passed him before, thick arms, bored expression, a gladius strapped across his back that you're 60% sure is ceremonial and 100% sure has drawn blood. He doesn't look at you. He's watching two men who are clearly too drunk to walk, much less consent to anything. One of them arguing with a girl half his size while gesturing wildly. She's holding her ground, lips tight, expression unreadable, but her stance says she's ready to move, or run, or fight. And that's the truth of it. Violence isn't the shadow here. It's the rule. If you don't see it in action, you see it in the aftermath. Bruised lips, swollen cheeks, bite marks that weren't requested. Girls walking with a limp, pretending it's from a good night, when you can tell the bone under their skin doesn't agree. You hear things too, muffled sobs, sharp gasps that don't sound like pleasure. The slap of something hard hitting something soft. The silence after. Clients come here to forget, but some come to punish. They don't always say it aloud, but you feel it in their body language. The man who grips too hard. The one who won't make eye contact. The one who needs someone weaker to destroy just to feel real again. You follow the sound of raised voices down a side corridor. A young man, barely more than a boy, cheeks flushed. Hand still wet with wine, shoves a girl hard against the wall. He's shouting about something she said, or didn't say. She's not shouting back, she's frozen. The guard doesn't move, not yet. Maybe the coin hasn't exchanged hands yet. Maybe it has and he doesn't care. You feel your fists clench. You're nobody here. You know that. But still. Then the brothel's rhythm does what it always does. It swallows it. The man is pulled back by a friend. The girl disappears into a room. The guard steps in, finally, and says something low and guttural, the kind of tone that means, try again and I'll make you wish you hadn't. But even that feels rehearsed. Not because he wants to help, because he wants the noise to stop, and you start to see it everywhere now. A girl steps back a half step too fast when a client raises his voice. A boy with a split lip grins too wide when a new customer enters the room. A flicker of fear, then control, then routine. Like they have all learned how to reset their expressions before someone sees too much. Rome claimed to regulate its brothels. Technically, there were laws in place. Prostitution was legal, but assault? That was a crime, at least on paper. But this is ancient Rome we're talking about. The law didn't protect the poor, it didn't protect the enslaved. It didn't even pretend to protect prostitutes. Unless you were rich enough to cause trouble by dying. No one was going to investigate the bruises on your neck or the broken rib you earned from a senator's elbow. You overhear a client boasting loudly, proudly that he taught the little Thracian some respect. His friend laughs. They clink cups. Somewhere nearby, the girl he's talking about sits very still on a bench, a fresh cut over her eyebrow. She's not crying. You doubt she still does. There's a term Romans used for this, vis libidinis, violence of lust. It was the polite way of saying that he wanted her and didn't take no for an answer. Historians still debate whether this phrase was an official category or just a convenient euphemism. Either way, it was everywhere, scribbled in documents, etched into graffiti, whispered like a secret you didn't want to admit out loud. And let's be clear, there were no panic buttons, no safe rooms. If a client became violent, the best you could hope for was a witness who gave enough of a damn to intervene. Sometimes the other workers helped each other, pulled someone out of a room, distracted a client, blocked a door. But they weren't superheroes. They were tired, hungry, and terrified too. One of the more haunting things you learn in this place is how many women carried small knives, hidden in folds of cloth, tucked under bedding. Some were never used, others had notches. You see one now, slipped beneath a mattress, rusted with age, and something darker. It's not intimidation, it's insurance. You step into a corner alcove and notice the faint outline of a painting that's mostly worn away. It once showed a woman holding a man by the throat, not lovingly, her face stern, commanding. The image has been scraped almost completely off, replaced by another, more submissive, more palatable. You wonder who did the scraping, and why. There's a legend in Pompeii about the girl named Tanquil. No one's sure if she was real or just a tale passed around by those who needed her to be. According to the story, she killed a client with a sharpened hairpin after he tried to strangle her. She hid the body in a wine vat and kept working until someone found the blood trail. The magistrates came, but when they found out the man was a foreigner, they let her go. She became a myth, the girl who fought back. You see her name etched into the stone, faint but there. Tanquil was right. But for every Tanquil, there were hundreds who didn't survive the night, and no wall carvings remember them. Back in the hallway, another door slams. Someone screams, quick and high-pitched. Then silence. No one moves. A lamp flickers out. You realise in that stillness that the brothel isn't just unsafe. It's a cage with no guards, only watchers. And the watchers don't care if you live or die, only if you keep the noise down. At some point during the night, though the oil lamps don't tell time, and there are no windows to confirm it, the energy shifts. The chaos simmers down, the laughter thins, the wine runs dry, and what was once noise becomes a thick, heavy quiet. Not peaceful, not restful, just tired. This is the hour Romans rarely talked about. The sad hour before dawn, when the last clients stagger out into the street, buckling their sandals with sticky fingers, when the bravado drains from the gladiators, and even the guards look away more than they look ahead. This is when the masks come off. The stage goes dark. And what's left behind is something rawer than anything you've seen all night. Aftermath. The brothel isn't empty, not even close. But the pace is slower now. The rooms are still occupied. Some, but others are silent, their doors open, beds stained, walls freshly scraped. You pass one where a girl lies motionless on her slab, not asleep, just staring at the ceiling with a look that's more calculation than rest. Her tunic is wrinkled, her lip is swollen, and there's blood on the inside of her thigh. She notices you watching, doesn't react, doesn't flinch, just blinks slowly like she's done the math and decided you're not worth the energy. You move on. Every sound is sharper now. A cough becomes an explosion. A footstep echoes like thunder. The oil lamps are burning low, sputtering. Some are out completely, their wicks floating in cold oil like drowned worms. In this flickering half-light, the building looks less like a place of business and more like a prison that forgot what its walls were for, and then you hear it. Crying. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just small, tight sobs, trying not to be heard. You follow it around a corner into a narrow hallway, one of the smaller ones. A girl is hunched against the wall, knees drawn up, hands covering her face. No one's with her. She's not hiding from a client. He's long gone. This is the first moment she's been alone in hours. The first chance to let the sound out. You think about stepping forward, saying something, anything, but what would you say? She's not crying because something just happened. She's crying because everything happened. And now the adrenaline is gone. The curtain's closed. The audience has left. She doesn't need a saviour. She needs time, and she won't get it. Around another bend, two girls are washing up in a cracked basin of cloudy water. One scrubs her arms with a rag, wiping away fingerprints, sweat and whatever else was left behind. The other pulls something from her hair, a coin, maybe a beetle, and mutters something under her breath. Their movements are mechanical, practiced. This isn't self-care, it's maintenance. You notice now how many of them are limping, rubbing joints, stretching fingers that have curled unnaturally from gripping too hard or being gripped too long. One girl walks past barefoot, carrying her sandals in one hand and a bloodied rag in the other. Her gaze is vacant, you don't ask. There's a smell in the air that wasn't there earlier. Less perfume, less wine, more human. Sweat, yes, but also something sourer. Decay, maybe. The kind that clings to old bandages and discarded garments. Someone throws a bucket of dirty water into the alley through a side door. It splashes against the cobblestones with a slap. A few rats scatter. One doesn't. And here's something you didn't expect. Singing. Faint, cracked, almost tuneless. From one of the rooms, a voice hums an old lullaby, maybe Greek, maybe Thracian. It doesn't matter. It's not for you, it's not for anyone. Just a thread of comfort, dragged out of memory and sewn into the moment like a frayed ribbon. The girl singing isn't alone. You can hear another voice breathing beside her, matching her rhythm, half asleep or pretending. For a few seconds it almost sounds like peace. Then someone coughs nearby and the illusion shatters. You duck into the main corridor again and notice the blood, not a lot, not dramatic, just a smear near a doorframe like someone braced against it with a hand that shouldn't have been bleeding. Another dark patch near a basin. A stain on the sheet still clinging to one stone bed like a flag of surrender. None of it fresh. None of it cleaned. There's no one here for that. You hear voices again, low, hoarse, tired. Two girls talking near a pile of broken amphorae. One is recounting her night in clipped phrases. The fat one fell asleep. I left before he noticed. The other nods, unwrapping a fig from a scrap of linen and offering half. They chew in silence, staring into the dark like war veterans watching the horizon for the next battle. One of them scratches something into the wall with a nail. You can't see what, doesn't matter. Another mark, another moment memorialised before the next one arrives. There's academic debate about what happened after the brothel closed each night, if it ever truly did. Some argue there was no downtime, just shifts, rotations, girls sleeping in the 2-hour bursts, changing tunics, reapplying paint. Others believe there were hours of stillness, moments of quiet reflection or exhaustion, where the building exhaled. You don't know which version is more tragic. The truth is probably both. You step into the central courtyard again, and for the first time, it feels still. A few figures lie curled in corners. One girl sleeps with her head on a folded tunic. Another has her arms wrapped around her knees, as if even in dreams she can't let herself relax. No one talks. No one sings anymore. Above you, the sky has just begun to shift. Not light, not yet, but the black is thinning into the charcoal grey. Dawn approaches, slow and merciless. You realise you've made it. Through the night. Through the rooms and the rituals and the endless rhythm of coin for flesh. But it doesn't feel like survival. It feels like damage. Like something has been scraped off you in layers you didn't know you had. The workers haven't slept. Not really. Most of them won't. Some will rise to clean, to rearrange, to prepare for another night. Others will take their pain with them to another part of the city, to a temple, to a friend, to no one at all. There is no ending here, just the next hour. The next knock on the door, the next coin. And you walk through the quiet now, past the sleeping, the sobbing, the singing that's already faded, and you understand that you never stood a chance. This place wasn't just designed to take your breath. It was built to take everything else too. The sad hour before dawn, when nothing is hidden anymore, and no one is pretending. You're still in the courtyard when you spot it, tucked into the wall near one of the side exits. Barely visible in the gloom of dying lamplight. A little altar. Not grand, not gilded, just a recessed niche carved into the stone filled with melted wax and brittle offerings. You lean in, expecting something generic, but what you find instead is a face you've seen before, a statue, maybe 8 inches tall, cast in clay and blackened by time. The nose is long, the beard curled, the eyes bulbous and a little mischievous. And the penis, of course, is enormous, almost comically so, Priapus. You've probably seen him in museums, or weird postcards, or somewhere deep in a travel guide that didn't expect you to take him seriously. But in a place like this, he's not a joke. He's not even really a god. He's a ward, a weapon, a warning, and he's everywhere. Little clay versions of him tucked into corners, frescoes of him towering over gardens and courtyards, amulets hanging from the necks of girls who don't laugh when they touch them. Priapus isn't just a symbol of fertility here. He's supposed to protect you. You take a step closer and notice the offerings. A few coins, mostly low-value bronze, dried figs, a scrap of wool, a loop of black hair tied with twine. Someone even left a little dish of milk, though it's long since gone sour. These are the prayers of the desperate. Not grand gestures, but whispered insurance policies. And it's not just Priapus who gets the credit. Tucked into another alcove is a tiny terracotta Venus, her breasts chipped but still shapely. Nearby, Mercury, god of commerce, and maybe the only honest god to preside over a brothel. Transactions, after all, are his domain. There's an odd duality in this place. Sex and sanctity side by side. You'd think a Roman brothel would spit in the face of the divine, but instead, the divine has been absorbed, moulded, turned into background decor for suffering. Gods aren't kept out, they're dragged in, handed incense and oil and told to deal with it. And there's something even stranger. You notice a necklace hanging from a nail above the altar. Not gold, just glass beads strung on fraying linen. But in the centre, a charm shaped like a hand. A manofica, a gesture where the thumb pokes between the index and middle fingers. You've seen it before, a rude gesture, yes, but also a protective one. It wards off the evil eye, the malocchio, the unseen curse. It's not Roman in origin, it's older, imported, like most of the girls. You begin to see these charms everywhere now. Tucked into the folds of tunics, tied around wrists, drawn in javelin and chalk beside beds. A few girls even have them tattooed, faded ink on collarbones or ankles, symbols meant to do what no law ever has, keep them alive. You start to understand something. This place isn't faithless. It's saturated with belief. Not belief in kindness or justice or even luck, but belief in shields, in signs, in small things that might, just might make a difference. When you can't escape the violence, the filth, the disease, you look for patterns, for gods that listen, for rituals that work, even if they never have. You run your fingers along the edge of the altar, brushing soot from the base. There's a tiny inscription carved into the stone, barely there. It reads, Domina Vide. Lady Watch. It's not clear who the lady is. Venus, a mother, a goddess who doesn't have a name anymore. Maybe it doesn't matter. The plea is the same, please see me. And yet, these charms don't seem to protect anyone. You've seen the bruises, the pregnancies, the bleeding mouths, the girls who disappear and aren't spoken of again. If the gods are here, they are not answering prayers. They are just watching from the shadows, muttering to themselves, maybe taking notes. You pass by another cubiculum and notice a candle still burning at its entrance, placed low near the floor. It's not for light, it's a funerary candle. A Roman tradition for the dead. You glance inside, no one is there. But the sheet on the bed is soaked red, and the smell... well, you don't want to know. Sometimes when a worker's died, the others lit a candle outside the room and left it burning until morning. No ceremony, no priest, just fire and silence. Maybe someone would sneak the body out through the rear alley and leave it near the tanner's district, where the stench was too strong for questions. Maybe the Leno would sell the remains to a doctor for training. Maybe she'd be buried quickly, quietly, with a broken pot instead of a tombstone. But still, the candle burns. There's academic debate, believe it or not, about whether Romans believed the gods were actually involved in brothel life, or if these rituals were just cultural reflex. Some scholars argue it was all transactional, paying homage to the gods so business would thrive, like paying temple taxes. Others think it was more personal, especially for the enslaved, a thread of control in a world that offered none. Either way, these little acts, the charms, the candles, the graffiti prayers, they're everywhere, because in this place you believe in whatever helps you sleep, even if nothing does. You turn a corner and see another shrine, this one barely maintained. A dusty figurine of Isis, an Egyptian goddess who somehow found a foothold in Roman brothels. She wasn't just foreign, she was maternal, compassionate, a mother to the broken, and in a place where most women were denied motherhood or punished for it, her presence is pointed. Someone brought her here, someone made space for gentleness. You stand there a long while. The building creaks around you. Somewhere a rat scuttles. The last of the oil flickers in its bowl. The air smells of incense and decay. You wonder if the gods hear any of it. The whispered pleas, the clutched charms, the desperate ragged prayers muttered between clients. If they do, their silence is deafening. You finally pull yourself away, not because you're done, but because you've started to feel what they feel. That deep, heavy exhaustion that even faith can't lift, the kind that makes you question whether protection was ever real in the first place, or just one more performance like everything else. And as you step past the altar, the statue of Priapus watches you with his obscene grin, unbothered, eternal, smug, because in this place not even the gods have mercy, they just take their cut. You're not expecting to see her, not here, not now. Maybe not ever, but there she is, draped in saffron linen that costs more than everything else in this building combined, walking through the hallway like she owns it, which in a way she might. Her hair is coiled in elaborate loops pinned with gold. Her sandals are clean, well made, never meant to touch blood-stained floors. She wears perfume that cuts through the sour stink of sweat and oil, and she carries herself like someone who doesn't need to flinch at the sound of a slap from behind a curtain. A Roman woman, a lady, and she just walked into the Lupanar like it was a garden party. Every eye in the corridor follows her, but no one speaks. The workers go still. The guards straighten. Even the Leno, who hasn't left his stool in hours, perks up, because when a woman like this enters, it isn't for gossip. It isn't curiosity. It's purpose. You hang back, watching from a shadow, trying to piece her together. Is she a senator's wife, a widow with too much time, a priestess, maybe? There's no male escort, no nervous glance, no veil to obscure her face. She walks with full knowledge of where she is and what it looks like. That tells you everything. She stops near a cubiculum where a younger girl waits, nervous, barely 17, thin and blinking too fast. The woman places a hand on the girl's chin, tilts her face toward the lamplight. She says something you can't hear. The girl nods. A coin changes hands. Not tossed, not flung, placed. Slowly, deliberately. Then they disappear behind the curtain. And suddenly the air shifts, because now the roles are reversed. It's rare. Not unheard of, but rare. Women in brothels were usually the product, not the patron, but Rome, for all its posturing, made exceptions, especially for women of means, especially when discretion was guaranteed. If a matron wanted to purchase a night of silence, tenderness, control, or to forget herself entirely, there was always a room available. You step lightly toward the cubiculum and pause just outside. You're not eavesdropping, not exactly, but curiosity has claws. Inside you hear nothing lewd. No moans, no gasps, just murmured Latin. Soft, almost comforting. A hand brushing fabric. A pause. Then the rustle of someone sitting down on stone. You peek through a gap in the curtain and see only their silhouettes. The lady sits on the bed, posture regal even here. Her fingers extended as the girl unlaces her sandals with a kind of reverence. It's not about sex, not yet, maybe not ever. This is intimacy, intention. A quiet moment purchased like jewellery. You've seen the crude graffiti outside these rooms bragging about who took whom, which acts were best. But no one writes about this, about the women who come to the brothel not for depravity, but for something they're not allowed to admit they want. Softness does, attention. Or maybe to be seen by someone who doesn't already know their name or their politics. Roman women of status were trapped in their own way. Kept behind walls, behind veils, behind reputations. The matronae, the highborn wives and mothers of the empire, were supposed to be virtuous, obedient, fertile. Their bodies existed to produce sons and their names to uphold family honour. Pleasure, personal choice, that belonged to dancers, courtesans, slaves. And yet here she is, in a brothel, with a girl who hasn't lived half as long, who probably doesn't know her client's full name and wouldn't say it aloud if she did, but she'll call her domina, she'll kiss her wrists, she'll listen when no one else ever does. You've read about this, in dusty margins of academic texts. Elite Roman women, especially widows or those with power of their own, sometimes used brothels as private theatres for desire. Not to shock, not to indulge, to reclaim something, the right to be touched without duty. The freedom to choose who lies beside them, even if they have to pay for it. There's still debate, of course. Some scholars dismiss the idea entirely, say it was exaggerated, that the stories were gossip or slander meant to humiliate powerful women. Others say the graffiti doesn't lie, that names like Cornelia and Domitia didn't appear on those walls by accident, that some women carved out space in secret, paying in gold for moments they couldn't afford in daylight. Back behind the curtain, the room is still quiet. The girl now sits beside the woman, their shoulders touching. A hand rests gently on a knee. The older woman leans in, murmurs something, then laughs, low and soft, like she hasn't done it in years. It's not a seduction, it's a release. You step away, not because you're done watching, but because you've seen enough. This isn't a spectacle, it's a reminder. No one, not even Rome's finest, escapes the hunger for connection. Some disguise it in rituals. Others wrap it in silk. Some sneak through alleyways and pass coins to strangers for 1 hour without masks. And the workers, they know this, they've always known. The girl with the delicate fingers and quiet voice might not know how to write her own name, but she knows how to touch a grieving woman's arm like it's sacred. She knows what to say when someone can't ask for comfort directly. She knows that intimacy is currency, and she's fluent in every denomination. You pass another cubiculum with its curtain tied open, no one inside. On the wall a message has been scratched in precise Latin. She wept, and I held her. Just that. No names, no price. And as the city begins to wake beyond the brothel's stone walls, you realise how much this place has seen. Not just the obvious sins, but the quiet ones, the vulnerable ones, the human ones. Because even in a Roman brothel, sometimes the dirtiest secret isn't the act, it's the tenderness. You think you've seen the worst of it, that your stomach's bottomed out, can't drop any further, but that's before you hear the small voice. Not a whisper, not a moan. A voice that doesn't belong in this place, and instantly your body knows it. It's too high, too soft, too young. You freeze, listen again. And there it is, behind a closed door in one of the back corridors, just far enough from the main rooms to be forgettable. Someone giggles awkwardly, then a small thud, then silence. You step toward it, and your body tenses in ways you didn't think possible. Because now you're meeting the part of the Roman brothel that almost no one talks about. The part that's been carefully sanded off the stone by history. The part that archaeologists shuffle past or euphemize, or explain away with vague phrases like youthful presence or novice attendance. You're about to confront the most brutal truth of the ancient sex trade. Children were there too. Rome didn't have age of consent laws, not in any modern protective sense. The line between childhood and adulthood was blurry, marked by rituals and clothes and social class, but not morality. And while elite Roman citizens might shield their sons and daughters from adult things until puberty, no such kindness was extended to the enslaved, especially not in a brothel. You edge closer to the door, the sound gone now. You're not sure if someone's watching you, or if this is one of those spaces where even the walls want you to keep walking. You open it a crack and peek inside. It's a storage room, or it's supposed to be. Crates, blankets, an overturned stool, and in the corner a girl who can't be more than 12, maybe younger. Thin arms, knees drawn to her chest, eyes too wide for her face. She doesn't speak, she doesn't move, she just stares. You shut the door. There's no guidebook for this moment, no academic footnote. No amount of historical distance can protect you from what your brain just processed. A child, in a brothel, waiting. Maybe for sleep, maybe for the next client. Rome enslaved people, that's a fact. But within that system, children were a commodity. They were cheaper, easier to train, and sometimes more profitable, especially when sold to brothels. Some were born inside the walls. The daughters of prostitutes were often raised with the expectation they'd join the trade. Others were trafficked from provinces, sold in markets, stripped of names, and deposited into places like this with a new identity and a single horrifying instruction: please the customers. You start to notice signs you missed before: a small pair of sandals near the basin, a tunic that wouldn't fit anyone over 4 feet tall, a discarded doll, wooden headless, its torso carved with simple swirls that mimic a dress. These aren't the belongings of adult women playing coy for coin. These are the forgotten traces of children. And they were not all girls. Boys were part of the system too. Some presented as feminine. Others were forced into roles that had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with demand. The brothel, after all, didn't discriminate. It only cared whether someone would pay. And someone always did. You pass another graffiti scrawl barely etched into the plaster. It reads, "Parvulus me timet." The little one fears me. There's nothing romantic about it. No bravado, just a fact. carved like a line in a ledger, a sentence with no sentence. There's debate among historians about the prevalence of child prostitution in ancient Rome. Some say it was uncommon, used as punishment or novelty. Others argue it was widespread, particularly in port cities and underground establishments. What isn't debated is the legality. There was none. No laws protected enslaved children from sexual exploitation. In the eyes of the empire, their bodies were just another asset. And in brothels they were sold, trained, and used before they could pronounce the names of the gods watching from above. You think about the girl in the corner, how long she's been here. If anyone's told her what her life is yet, or if she already knows, you think about the graffiti you've read. How many of those names were children once? How many still are? Maybe Fortunata was just a nickname given to a girl too young to know what fortune really meant. And here's a detail you don't want, but it clings anyway. Some clients requested children, not in whispers, not in code, in plain everyday speech. They'd ask for the new one, or the small one, or the quiet one. Some were wealthy enough to arrange exclusive access. Others came in with enough denarii to make the Leno look the other way. Not that he needed much convincing. The worst part? Some of them treated it like affection. They'd bring gifts, bracelets, dyes for clothes, sweets. Then claim they loved them. As if that made anything less monstrous. As if love and violence can coexist peacefully in a room with no windows and a stone bed. You step outside into the alley behind the brothel. Air thick with mildew and ash. A broken amphora lies shattered beside a drain. Flies buzzing around a puddle that doesn't smell like wine. This is likely where the trash goes. Maybe where some of the bodies go. You don't know if the girl in that room will end up here years from now. Her name etched on a wall by a man who paid 3 coins to be remembered. You look up at the sky, it's turning grey again, the colour of regret. There's no sun yet, just light pretending to be hope. Inside, the brothel stirs. Doors creak. Coins clink. The day begins again. The girl in the storage room will wake if she slept at all. Someone will bring her water. Someone else might not even ask her name. The walls won't remember her unless someone carves it. And even then, it'll just be a word. You turn back toward the building, every muscle heavy, every step a protest. And now you understand, truly, there's no bottom in this place. Only sancts. It starts as a thought you try to push away. Ridiculous, you tell yourself. Impossible. But it sneaks back in, slippery as oil. What if you fell in love here? Not with the idea of the brothel, not the fantasy of Roman seduction, but with an actual person, a worker. A girl with laughter like chimes and eyes too deep for this place. Or maybe a boy with soft hands who pretends he's made of stone. Maybe it begins with shared glances, a lingering touch, a whispered joke in the dark. You tell yourself it's different, that it matters, that you're not like the others, and you would be wrong. Falling in love in a brothel is like trying to light a candle underwater. It might flicker for a second, warm, bright, beautiful, but it's going out, no matter what. You cannot save someone in here. You cannot build a life out of whispered names and stolen time, and the second you believe you can, that's when the poison seeps in. Still, it happened. A lot more than you'd think. Roman history has its share of tragic lovers who met in places just like this. Pleasure houses, inns, back alley lupanaria. Men who fell for sex workers and tried to buy them out. Women who defied their families to run off with the girl from the cubiculum. Poets who wrote sonnets to mistresses who couldn't write their own names. It wasn't unheard of, it was just doomed. You walk the hall now with different eyes. You start to notice it. The subtle clues. A necklace passed between hands. A graffito scratched in one hand by someone literate. And a response in another. Barely legible but clearly heartfelt. Come back before Saturnalia. Someone left a gift near one of the stone beds, dried rose petals, carefully arranged. Who brought it? A client? A fellow worker? Someone who believed, however foolishly, that something sacred could exist here? It's easy to romanticize. After all, love is the ultimate rebellion in a place like this. It defies the rules, spits in the face of the transaction, turns something hollow into something full. But Rome wasn't interested in love, not here. Love was for respectable marriages, public alliances, gods with poetry carved beneath their feet. Love had rules, restrictions, legal pathways, and what existed in a brothel wasn't love to them, it was delusion. Or worse, interference in a financial arrangement. You pass a graffito carved deeper than the rest. Amavi et perdidi. I loved and I lost. No name, just a wound pressed into stone. Some men did try to free the ones they loved. There were cases, rare but real, of prostitutes being bought and manumitted by clients who claimed to care. Sometimes they married them, more often they didn't. Because it turned out that what felt noble in the low light of a brothel didn't translate so easily to daylight, where friends gossiped and reputations cracked. And then there were the ones who couldn't let go. One Roman story, half history, half legend, tells of a senator's son who fell in love with a brothel girl in Pompeii. He offered her money, clothes, even a citizenship if she'd come to live with him. She refused. Whether it was fear or duty or something else, no one knows. He came back again and again, then one night she was gone, moved, sold, maybe dead. He burned the building down. Or tried to. He was arrested, released, and promptly disappeared from public life. Another story, more chilling, speaks of a freedwoman named Navolia, who was once a sex worker and had married her client. She built a small fortune, even a tomb, but her epitaph barely mentions her name, only her husband's generosity. History remembers his act of liberation, not her survival. You walk through a quieter part of the brothel now, where no one speaks, but the weight of this unspoken thing lingers like smoke. Love, real or imagined. It's in the way some clients pause before leaving, the way certain workers smile just slightly as if to say, "You meant something, even if I can't say, what?" It's in the rings hidden beneath mattress, in the bracelets worn only during the last hour of the night. But the danger of love here isn't just heartbreak, it's retaliation. If a client got too attached, too jealous, the consequences could be brutal. Workers were beaten, transferred, punished, not for cruelty but for confusing the arrangement. You weren't allowed to belong to anyone unless someone paid for you first. Feelings complicated profit. Attachment got in the way of performance. And even the perception of favoritism could incite violence. Some brothel owners took precautions. They rotated workers between cities, changed their names, forbade repeat clients' nits. You weren't supposed to see anyone here more than once, not really. If you came back too often, someone might raise an eyebrow. If you lingered, someone might disappear. And yet they still tried. You see it now in the smallest details. A worker with a token tied around her ankle, worn and smooth, clearly gifted, clearly hidden. A client scrawling a name on the doorframe of a room before slipping out. A pair of hands brushing for just a second too long beneath a basin, neither one pulling away. The saddest love in this place is the kind that almost makes it. The couple who meets after hours. The girl who saves her coins. The boy who writes letters he can't send. The hope that one day they'll leave, live normally, open a bakery, raise pigeons, grow old. But in Pompeii, there's no time for someday. You pause in the main corridor and spot a carving you hadn't noticed before. It's shaped like a heart, but uneven, clumsy, scratched over a patch of faded plaster. Inside it, Tertia plus Lucius. A pairing, maybe real, maybe a moment of pretend. Underneath, another hand has added a single word. Why? And you understand now, love doesn't survive this place, not because it's impossible, but because it's unwelcome. By now, the light outside is crawling over the roof tiles, not quite sunrise, not quite darkness either, a smeary, uncertain grey that feels right for where you are, what you've seen. You start to notice more people moving, not the workers, not yet. It's the ones you haven't really registered before, the watchers, the whisperers, the quiet men in respectable sandals who loiter just a little too long outside the entrance. And now you're about to learn what happens when the law decides to remember this place exists. Because yes, prostitution in Rome is legal. Technically, openly, the empire, efficient as always, preferred to regulate vice rather than suppress it. Taxes were collected, registrations were issued. Brothels like this one paid fees to operate, and their workers, at least on paper, were officially classified as meretrices, registered sex workers. In exchange for this charming title, they received precisely 0 protections. But while the state allowed it, that didn't mean the people of Rome respected it, especially not the politicians, especially not the moralists. Especially not the bitter wives of bitter husbands who'd rather blame a Lupanar for their marital issues than the man snoring beside them. And when someone important got angry, really angry, that's when the law came storming in. It always started quietly. A whisper, a scroll delivered in haste, a magistrate's eyes narrowing as he passed a familiar face in an unfamiliar place. Sometimes a rival would use the brothel as leverage. I saw him with the Syrian girl, they'd hiss. And suddenly a senator found himself under scrutiny, not for visiting the brothel, but for getting caught. Today the warning signs are here. A man in a dark toga, too clean, too upright, not a client. You see him talking to the Leno, the brothel keeper. Not loud, but not pleasant either. The Leno listens with a face that shifts between fake curiosity and growing irritation. Eventually he nods, twice. The man leaves, but something changes. Rooms start closing. Not many, but enough. A girl disappears down a hallway with her belongings bundled in cloth. Another is quietly redirected from the front chamber to the rear, away from the street-facing door. The guards are alert now, standing straighter, pretending they're just leaning on walls, but you can feel it in their posture. Something's coming. You slide back into the shadows and wait. The Roman justice system wasn't about fairness. It was about order, status, visibility. If a brothel like this stirred up the wrong kind of attention, if a senator's son was found dead in one of the rooms, or if a married matron accused a girl of seduction, or if someone's slave turned up pregnant and pointed a finger, then suddenly all the laws meant to keep things running smoothly were reinterpreted. Did that girl have a license? Was she properly registered? Was she of age? Was she foreign? Was the brothel operating within the right district? Were the taxes paid this month? It was never about morality, it was about control. You think of one case recorded in passing by an ancient writer, a woman named Thalassa, enslaved, who was accused of polluting a noble household after a young man fell in love with her. She didn't seduce him, didn't even speak to him beyond what was expected. But when he wouldn't stop talking about her, his father had her arrested, not for prostitution, for corruption of values, whatever that means. She was whipped in the forum and sold to another city. There's a knock at the outer door, not the usual drunk slam or casual push. This is formal, measured, the kind of knock that comes with sandals that have never stepped in filth. A city official. You peek from behind a pillar and see three of them, two wearing the short crested cloaks of local lictors, the third in the simple but unmistakable garb of a praefectus vigilum. The watch commander. They've come to ask questions. The Leno greets them with the forced hospitality of a man who knows exactly how much trouble he's in and exactly how much coin he's stashed away to avoid it. The guards barely speak. One of them has a whip at his side, the other carries a writing tablet. That's the real threat. Because in Rome, being written down was sometimes worse than being punished. Names logged, places flagged. Once you were on the record, you were vulnerable. And if you were poor, foreign, or unlicensed, you were expendable. You edge back down a corridor as the inspection begins. The officials ask to see licenses, not from the Leno, from the workers, which is laughable since most of them can't read, can't write. Some don't even know the Roman name they were assigned. One girl holds up a wooden tag tied around her neck with the wrong date scratched into it. Another can't find hers. Another bursts into tears and says she never had one. The Leno tries to smooth it over, offers a bribe. You see it, a small purse of coins pasted discreetly. The commander doesn't reject it, but his eyes stay cold. They move deeper into the building, pushing into rooms, asking questions. Who owns you? Who sold you? Do you bleed? Do you speak Latin? The girls stare ahead, numb. They have heard this before. They know it doesn't matter how they answer. And then the whistle comes, short yet sharp. From the street outside, a signal. The inspection stops. One of the guards disappears. Another raises a hand. No arrests, not today. Why? Who knows? Maybe the bribe worked. Maybe someone with more power called them off. Maybe a bigger scandal erupted across town and this brothel no longer mattered. But the damage is done. You see the aftermath already taking shape. A girl sitting in a corner, head in her hands, shaking. Another pacing with short angry steps, muttering about being sold again. A third clutching a wooden token like it's an anchor. They'll talk about this all day. Wonder if the guards will return, if someone will vanish in the night, if the bribe was enough. This is how the law exists here. Not as a shield, but as a sword that's always half drawn. A threat, not a promise. A tool for the rich, a trap for everyone else. You walk past the outer courtyard and spot a new message being carved into the wall. The gods don't come, but the law does, and neither shows mercy. You knew there had to be more. The layout of the brothel was too straightforward. The room's too exposed. No place this twisted could possibly exist without a few hidden corners, a few back rooms not meant for wandering eyes. And you were right. You find the entrance behind a warped linen curtain near the end of the eastern corridor, nothing special at first glance. But there's something off about the wall next to it. A soft draft. A patch of stone that doesn't echo like the rest when you brush your fingers against it. You push gently and it shifts. The door swings inward, not outward. Clever. And what lies beyond isn't more bedrooms or a latrine or another gloomy hallway. It's different. The light changes. Dimmer, yes, but also redder. More deliberate, as if someone meant for this space to feel like another world entirely. You step in and the temperature drops a few degrees. The smell too is different. Less wine, less sweat, more smoke, burnt herbs maybe, or something pretending to be incense. The room is round, circular. A rare shape in a place obsessed with economy of space. The walls are covered not with frescoes of erotic acts, but with dark angular patterns that don't make sense. Not immediately. Then you realise they're glyphs, symbols. Some Greek, some Latin, some much older. The floor is bare, cold, there's no bed, just a stone platform in the centre, low and wide, almost like an altar. You're not in a brothel anymore. You're in a shrine, or something pretending to be one. This is one of the back rooms. Not every Lupanar had them, but enough did. The kind of room no guidebook mentions and no scholar wants to explain. The place where the usual rules, coin for flesh, client and worker, start to break apart. Here, you're not buying a service, you're part of a ritual. You've heard rumours, of course, everyone has, about Roman elites who paid for theatrical experiences in brothels, costume roleplay, mock sacrifice, goddess enactments. But this isn't theatre. This is older, stranger, maybe imported from a province, maybe cooked up by someone with too much time and a very loose grip on divinity. You notice a bronze figure in the corner, partially cloaked in shadow. Not a god you recognise, not Venus, not Priapus. This one's horned, its hands outstretched as if asking or commanding. Its face isn't human. It's part goat, part man, part nightmare. It might be Pan, or something Pan wants nothing to do with. And on the altar, stains, not old ones. Some dark, some rust-coloured, some sticky. You don't ask what made them, you already know. There's a phrase for this kind of worship in Rome. Mysteria. Secret rites, sacred darkness. Ostensibly religious. In reality, deeply personal, and often exploitative. Some were legitimate cultic rituals tied to imported gods like Cybele or Dionysus, but others were invented, performed in brothels like this for wealthy patrons who wanted more than bodies. They wanted control over something bigger, or the illusion of it. Some would come here to reenact their favourite myths, or their worst memories. Others demanded silence, blindfolds, chains, theatrics so elaborate they felt like hallucinations. There were even rumours of death. Sacrifice, not often, but once is enough to haunt the air. You step further in and spot the writing scratched near the base of the altar. I gave her to the gods, she did not scream. You want to believe it's fiction, that it's part of the show, that the brothel leaned into macabre poetry. But then you see the grooves in the floor, the channels, the way they slope ever so slightly toward a drain. This wasn't for drama, this was for flow. You try to leave, you really do. But your eyes catch another object. A wooden mask, carved crudely, but with enough care that it's clearly been used. The mouth is open, the eyes are wide. It's not a mask you wear for fun. It's one you wear to become someone else, or to stop being who you were. Some brothels offered these experiences as transformational acts. A client could choose to be a god, a monster, a priest, a beast. And the workers, they didn't get a script, just the knowledge that this one would be different. Sometimes they were paid more, sometimes they weren't paid at all, because these back rooms didn't always operate under the same rules. They were favours, rituals, secrets kept for people too powerful to deny. One fringe theory, whispered among classicists and mostly dismissed, is that some of these rooms doubled as punishment chambers, not for clients, but for the workers. A girl who disobeyed, who talked too much, who bit back. She might be sent here for a night, or two. Whatever happened inside wouldn't be discussed afterward. There'd be marks, maybe a limp, maybe silence, and no one would ask. You crouch beside the altar, a piece of cloth is tucked beneath it, pale, stiff. You pull it free and unfold it slowly. It's stained and torn, but there's a symbol drawn in the centre, a circle with a hand inside it. Not Roman, Definitely not Latin. You don't know what it means, but it was drawn with intent. It feels less like decoration and more like a warning. You start to hear something then, not real sound, more like the memory of it. Screams, chants, laughter where it doesn't belong, echoes maybe, your brain trying to fill the void with something it understands. Or maybe this room wants you to hear it. To stay, to watch. You stand quickly and back away. There's a final inscription above the door, written in a dialect you don't recognise but with enough familiarity to pass it. It reads, "Once entered, twice marked." You don't know what that means, you don't want to know. You step back into the hallway, back into the soft stink and muffled moans and dying candlelight of the normal brothel. And for the first time all night, this hellhole feels almost safe by comparison. Almost. Because now you know there are rooms here that weren't made for money. They were made for something much darker. The ground shakes. It's subtle at first. Barely more than a hum under your feet, like someone rolling a heavy cart across cobblestones outside. But then it pulses again, harder, enough to make the oil in a nearby lamp slosh sideways, flicker high and almost go out. A girl clutches the doorframe as she walks, startled. You pause, wait for it to stop, and it does, for a moment. Then comes another rumble, deeper this time, like the mountain itself is clearing its throat. No one screams, no one runs, they just pause. Because in Pompeii, tremors happen. They're common, forgettable, or at least they were. You already know what's coming. You've seen the ash-frozen bodies in museum glass, you've read the textbooks, seen the documentaries, but they didn't show you this moment, this exact moment, when people felt the first real warning and chose to ignore it. When the wine was still half drunk, the moans still echoing behind half-drawn curtains, when the world tilted just slightly wrong and everyone convinced themselves it was nothing. You walk slowly now through corridors you know you'll never see again. The frescoes on the walls, glorious, obscene, ridiculous, suddenly seem more fragile. They shimmer under lamplight like they're holding their breath. You pass a room where a client is snoring beside a worker who stares up at the ceiling. Her hands folded over her stomach like she's already been laid to rest. Another tremor makes the plaster behind her bed crack. She doesn't flinch. The brothel has known violence, disease, fire, but it's not ready for this. You push open a side door to the alley. The sky is thick, grey, cloudy, but not from storm. It's darker than it should be, given the hour. There's no sun, just haze, and a strange acrid taste in the back of your throat. You hear shouting from further down the street. Not panic, not yet, just confusion. You're still standing there when the first real eruption hits. It's not what you expect. There's no fireball, no lightning bolt from Olympus. Just sound. A crack like the earth itself just broke in two. You fall to your knees instinctively, hands covering your ears, chest tight. The ground doesn't shake this time. It convulses. Behind you a scream. Somewhere glass shatters. A moment later ash starts to fall, not flakes, not soft. It's like someone is sifting flour from the sky, fast and endless. Back inside, chaos blooms. The workers, tired, bruised, half-dressed, are running now, some holding hands, others grabbing their belongings, coins, shoes, small idols. The Lino is shouting over them, trying to herd them like livestock. You hear one girl yell back in Greek. She's not going to die here. Not in this place, not like this. A ceiling beam groans, the floor tilts. And still the customers stumble around like confused cattle. One man demands his coin back, another grabs at a worker's wrist trying to finish what he started. She slaps him hard enough to leave a print, then bolts towards the courtyard. You move with the current, through bodies and screams and the sound of Pompeii collapsing. There's one final moment of surreal beauty, just before it gets worse. A girl, Fortunata maybe, or someone like her, pauses in the doorway with a torch in her hand. She's silhouetted by the flickering light, hair wild, tunic torn at the shoulder, eyes blazing. For one breath she looks like a goddess, not a victim, not a slave, just power wrapped in skin. Then, the roof behind her caves in. She disappears into dust. You make it into the street. The air is worse here, choking. You wrap cloth around your mouth, though it barely helps. The sky is vomiting ash, thick as snow, hot as summer. You can't see the mountain from here, but you can feel it like a giant sitting on your chest. You pass others fleeing, mothers holding children, men dragging carts, dogs howling and running in frantic circles. No one knows which way is safe, only that staying still is suicide. You glance back toward the brothel. It's still standing, barely, its facade half smeared with ash, its windows black and hollow. You can almost hear it breathing. The moans, the cries, the laughs, the carved names, all of it about to be sealed in stone. And here's the thing, Pompeii doesn't die all at once, it takes hours. First the ash, then the pumice, then the pyroclastic surge. So fast, so hot, it turns blood to steam before your brain registers pain. The people inside the brothel don't stand a chance. Some will be found years later curled into corners, arms over heads, others locked in embraces. One man will be discovered lying on a stone bed, trousers down, hand still gripped around himself. The final act of denial. They'll be called the Ash People, the plaster ghosts, but they were real. You know that now. There's one graffito near the brothel's entrance that archaeologists debated for years. A single word. Remanabimus. We will remain. They were right. Sort of. Because the walls remain. The carvings, the stains, the chains, the names. Every moment you've witnessed will be buried but not forgotten. Not really. Someday a pickaxe will crack through the silence. A scholar will brush dust from a fresco. A tourist will pose beside a stone bed trying to smile, but they won't know what it smelled like, what it sounded like, what it cost to survive even a single night here. Only you do. You don't look back again. You run, you make it down the slope, lungs full of ash, eyes stinging, feet stumbling over fallen tiles and discarded sandals. The streets of Pompeii are a chaos of half-fled carts, animals tangled in reins, and people whose faces are all shaped by the same emotion. Disbelief. Because how could it end like this, in the middle of the day, in the middle of everything? No prophecy, no to inform the forum's augurs, no divine intervention, just clouds, fire, and choking silence punctuated by screams. And somewhere back there, behind crumbling walls and centuries of shame, the brothel goes quiet. You don't know when it collapses, maybe hours later, maybe minutes after you fled, but it does. The walls that held so many secrets etched with crude jokes, aching prayers, names scratched by girls who couldn't write their own letters, fall under the weight of a sky turned lethal. Stone beds splinter, frescoes crack. The rooms you walked through become tombs, sealed chambers of agony, pleasure, routine, rot and memory. You can still feel it though, the air inside heavy, human, that strange, terrible warmth of a place built not just for survival but for commodified touch. A market of loneliness, a furnace of craving and control, the taste of oil, blood, old fruit, and powdered lime still sits on your tongue. You cough hard and the noise tastes grey. The city, as it dies, doesn't offer resolution. There's no final word, no last confession from the Leno, no poetic ending where the workers run free and find peace. That's not how this goes. Some of them may have escaped, ran south, reached the sea, started over in some other Roman corner where their past could remain unspoken. But most? They're ash now, body-shaped holes waiting for plaster. Bones twisted mid-flight or mid-fight. And for those who stayed, their last moments were spent beneath flickering lamps, under crumbling frescoes, with coins still clutched in one hand and a name echoing in their heads. Someone they loved or hated or prayed to. It's hard to say. All we're left with are poses. The historians will analyse the layers, stratum by stratum, write about economic functions, trade routes, urban zoning. They'll say the brothel was a reflection of Roman tolerance, or depravity, or pragmatism. Some will admire the wall paintings, others will condemn the exploitation. No one will fully agree. There's debate even now about the Lupanar's role. Was it an average working-class joint or something more elite? Were the girls mostly enslaved, or some willingly working for coin? Were they Greek, Egyptian, local, something in between? Did any survive the eruption? Historians argue over pottery shards and bone fragments, chasing clarity through the fog of millennia. But you were there, you walked the halls, you breathed it in, and the truth is simpler and harder. No one really lived in that brothel. They endured it, survived it, night by night, bruise by bruise, breath by breath. You weren't meant to fall in love there. You weren't meant to sleep there. You were meant to pass through, client, worker, or stray wanderer like yourself, and leave something behind. A coin, a stain, a scar. It was never just about sex. That was the product, sure. But what was being traded every night over and over was agency, power, the illusion of being in control for the buyer and for the sold. The worker's smile, the client's fantasy, the Leno's ledger, all of it a desperate, sweaty lie they all agreed to believe in because it made the night go faster. And then Mount Vesuvius did what no empire could. It stopped the lie. It silenced the jokes, the moans, the transactions, locked every scream, every graffito, every touch into volcanic amber. And in doing so, it made it eternal. Because now people walk through that ruin with cameras and guidebooks, mouths open in awe at the carvings, the beds, the preserved bodies. They joke, they laugh, they point, but they don't know what you know. That surviving a night in that place was almost impossible. Not because of the violence or the filth or the disease, though, sure, all that too, but because of the weight of being seen and not seen at the same time, of being wanted but never cared for, of being used in the most clinical transactional sense and then discarded without a name, unless someone thought to carve it in plaster. You turn your back to the mountain finally. The city roars behind you, but you can't help it anymore. You walk. You don't look for others. You don't speak. There's no speech to give. The brothel is gone, but its memory will outlive you, because some truths survive better than flesh, and Pompeii preserved everything. Even the things you wish it hadn't.